Hello and welcome to episode 145 of the Crate and Crowbar. It is the turns to look at date 14th of June 2016. My name is Chris Thurston and today I'm joined by Philippa War.
Hi.
And Tom.
Francis.
Tom Francis. I almost started saying senior and I've literally never done that in the 145 episodes of this podcast. I don't know why.
Hi.
Hi Tom Senior. Who's actually in LA right now.
We could just say hi to him.
Hi Tom Senior.
Hello.
Wherever you are, but where you are is LA, which is where E3 is, which is why Tom is there.
That means my email for organising this podcast was completely redundant, so I already knew both of you were coming and Tom was in America.
Yeah, indeed. That's probably the most earth-shattering revelation of this week.
Biggest news first.
In what has been a week of staying up real late to watch big adverts that are fun.
Yeah.
Or
fun
sleeping
adverts.
and letting other people do that.
I enjoy it. I'm very tired. I'm extremely tired.
Yeah.
But I have enjoyed it.
You stayed up for the Sony one.
I did. I
When
stayed up
did
for
that finish?
3 in the morning.
Right.
And Bethesda finished 4 in the morning the night before, so it's been a wild ride.
See, the thing is, you're always like, this is my Eurovision. And I'm like, yeah, but I have Eurovision.
I also have Eurovision.
Only because now me.
No, I've always enjoyed Eurovision. Not as much before. Anyway.
But Eurovision was all about, like, you know, inspiring togetherness in Europe. And
stupid
this
outfits.
is very much just sort of selling you things.
But it's in such a spectacular way.
At E3, there's a higher percentage of things I genuinely enjoy rather than ironically enjoy.
That's true.
I have never ironically enjoyed Eurovision in my life. Shall we talk about this E3
The
then?
Electric 3. Okay,
Yeah.
so we are going to, I don't know if we will even get around to what we've been playing in this show. Hopefully we will. But there's a lot of E3 to talk about. Actually, for a show that people maybe saying is not been like laden with earth-shattering revelations. There's actually loads of, putting them in on a big list, I realise there's loads of games that I want to talk about. So we're going to go roughly in chronological order of the announcements through games that we have something to say about. This will be by no means a comprehensive list of things that were announced. Because there's plenty of good things that were announced that literally none of us care about.
Or things that were sort of reiterated but didn't get much in the way of new information beyond
Yeah.
like a few extra
Yeah.
seconds
And
of
things
footage.
that look interesting, but we still know nothing about what they are.
Yeah.
There's some of that in this list, but yeah. Anyway,
First.
let's dive in to the electrical arts. Whence come Titanfall 2, which was teased a couple of months ago with a trailer with a bad VO and stuff. And at the EA's conference, they actually properly showed off 2 sides of it. Single player, which will have a proper campaign where the robot can talk. The Titan is your pal.
It's like a buddy comedy with
Yeah.
a giant robot.
Yeah, its partner's been killed, and it's kind of bit, sort of jaded or whatever, and you're like the young rookie.
This is like weirdly like the plot of Almost Human, the Carl Urban sci-fi series, except that in that one, it's the human whose partner's been killed and his replacement android is like a faulty one who accidentally has morals.
Whereas in this, it's a robot whose human has died, and his replacement human is presumably like a mute sociopath.
Yeah.
But no, so that looked fun, but the multiplayer looked exactly the same, but with grappling hooks, so therefore better.
And all the DLCs going to be free, or
And that's
all
the big
all
thing.
the maps and modes?
Yeah, they confirmed to Sam, editor of PC Gamer, that all of the post-launch maps and modes and game-related stuff will be completely free, which is the best thing they could possibly have said, because all they need to do to make that game great is make the same game again and not fuck up the business model, as we've said before. So, yeah.
Quite fancy the single player.
Yeah.
I think it's like just be a good like way into it for me, because one of the reasons I never played Titanfall was I'm just not usually into competitive shooters. But if you like ply me with single player, I can be persuaded to try them.
Well, they did try, like, the storyline, the kind of weird, mostly multiplayer, definitely multiplayer, somewhat narrative-driven single-player campaign thing. Not single-player, story campaign thing in the first game. which was a really inventive idea if it had worked, but I figure they just did it and then were like, actually, it works. Pre-rendered first-person cutscenes where a robot is your pal.
Yep.
But this was immediately followed by my first round of clasping my hands to my mouth about a spaceship of the week. It's happened about 3 or 4 further times.
Was this when you weren't just clasping your hand to your mouth about spaceships, you were also reaching over and hitting me?
Oh, yeah. So immediately before the...
Because I wasn't paying enough attention to the spaceships.
Look harder.
Immediately before the E3 conference, we were sat on the sofa getting ready. Well, I was ready for it. And I got so preemptively excited that Mass Effect was going to be at the show that I did like a little flap and I lost my iPad down the side of the sofa, which almost completely endangered my ability to tweet nonsense during the show.
That was cool.
Even so, in any case, they showed the most they've ever shown of Mass Effect Andromeda, which is a new one. Pissed off a lot of people, actually. The community was in revolt. Not quite on the Mass Effect 3 ending scale revolt, but they had convinced themselves that it was going to be a much more substantial showing for the game. So the fact that it's still like a year and a bit off and whatever, they only showed fragments of it, really wound people up. But I actually quite like that they just gave you a glimpse at it without giving too much away. It feels...
They were like... They'll pile it on when it's ready. Right?
Yeah.
There are, I think, more than 30 trailers for Mass Effect 2.
Well, BioWare kind of do this. Like, Dragon Age Inquisition was similar in that they really didn't show very much of that game before it was like on top of people. Like, given how huge that game is and how many different environments there are and so on, they did like one demo of people fighting a dragon in the desert. And then were like, that's your lot. And then left the entire expanse of the game just for the actual release thing, which is actually I prefer, because especially those... Now the new one's so much about discovery. Very excited about it. There's a new ship that looks like the sexy Normandy. Yep. Which is called the Tempest.
I didn't know anything about it really before this, except like, I'd seen that teaser where there's like a planet involved and maybe some kind of car. But I still wasn't sure of like, cause they keep talking about like, this is a whole new adventure and like Shepard's thing is over. And I get that. But I didn't know, is it like a completely different game, or is it basically the same game but with a new cast of characters? And it seems more like the latter in that you have a ship that looks a bit like Normandy, and it's gonna be like a similar kind of protagonist plus few companion characters going around talking to people and trying to sleep with their crewmates.
Indeed, yeah. Yeah, and this actually, it's probably might be worth linking to the frame-by-frame analysis I did for PC Gamer immediately after the trailer was shown. Because there's actually a bunch of stuff in there, even if there's not a lot, sort of implies that you'll be able to land your ship on planets, and the Mako tank will come out the back of it. That, you'll visit like human colonies, but also maybe like more structured, kind of linear Mass Effect style levels. One of the companions is definitely a Krogan. The other is definitely a Solarian, and so on. And other such things you can get by looking at it. They also confirmed after the show a bunch of things that were implied by the trailer but not explicitly stated. So at the end of the trailer, the character wakes up, a woman who's presumably just woken up from like a cryo sleep on the massive Ark ship that they show at the end of the trailer. And that is the protagonist, or the female version of the protagonist. Right. And her name is Ryder, which is she's named after Sally Ride, who is the first American woman in space, because Shepard is named after Alan Shepard, who's the first American in space. And Ryder is after the first woman in space, which was kind of a nice touch.
It's nice that they're featuring her as the example protagonist.
Well, so someone asked them about that. Like, so, is she default Ryder, right? Like default male Shepard. And they actually said that yes and no, because there's more than one Ryder, as in it's a family thing. So it's got like a Lost in Space vibe, like there's several of them. And this was not like, they implied, I think, in one of the YouTube gaming interviews, that this might be a twist on how you pick your character. That it's not male and female version of the same person. Right. It's which member of the family you are. Which is, I think, a really interesting way of switching it up.
And then the one you don't play as gets kidnapped.
Yeah.
Just the usual way.
Well, I mean, Dragon Age 2 has a similar framing device, although you do pick whether the oldest Hawk sibling is a man or a woman. But you start with your family, and then based on your choices, you lose a sibling. So that's cool.
In Costume Quest, which sibling you pick determines which one wears the candy corn costume, because the candy corn costume can't do anything, and so that one gets kidnapped.
So yeah, so I'm dead excited.
There were some big flying aliens. They look cool. Like, they
Oh,
showed
yeah,
a bunch of
big,
like
like,
planets and stuff, and to sort of show how exotic this new place is. And there was just big like air whales basically floating past.
Sky whales. There's some like confusion about when it's set. That's just, but because that's sort of interest based on, because one thing they've said is that it won't really take into account the endings of Mass Effect 3. But I don't know exactly if that's just someone misinterpreting an interview quote. But there are like two warring schools of thought on this now. One is that it's set hundreds of years after the trilogy, which would sort of explain the technology being more advanced and so on. The other is that you head off to this new galaxy, Andromeda, during the events of the original trilogy, but the journey takes hundreds of years. So it's sort of whatever happened with Shepard is not relevant to the start of this, at least.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I actually prefer the idea that it sort of allows Mass Effect 3 to have ended and for time to have passed and for this to be a new thing, particularly because some of the coolest little visual teasers in the new trailer gesture at stuff from the end of Mass Effect 3 that I think is kind of neat. But rather than me wank on about spaceships anymore, how about that FIFA 17? Of which we saw more story
I liked that.
than we saw of Mass Effect.
I was super tempted to play. Like,
yeah.
I've never really played a FIFA game. Like, it's one of those ones that I've watched other people play from comfort of sofas. But I was really sort of weirdly taken with the idea of sort of like working my way up through I don't know, I guess you just must have come out of the youth squad as some hot talent or something, and then you sort of have to
It's worth
earn your stripes or whatever.
So yeah, this is a
Your stunts,
cinematic,
I guess.
cinematic narrative campaign for the new FIFA with like huge production values, like a TV show built into the game about a young British footballer, which is bananas but kind of awesome.
Yeah, I really like it. What's his name? Something Hunter.
Alex Hunter.
Alex Hunter.
That name surely has already been used as a game protagonist.
To be fair,
I've
it's
played
also
about 3
a
Hunters and about 19
fairly
Alexes.
typical footballer name, I'd
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
So I think it works.
But I love they had to give him a video game protagonist action movie name as well, though. Like, because the Titanfall guy, in the Titanfall trailer, the robot goes like, "I am now assigned to Rifleman Jack Cooper."
Yeah.
Yeah, oh god, yeah.
Cringe
I am now
Jack.
assigned to Rifleman John Protagonist.
Yeah.
Jake Hard
I think
is a
I'm
real
kind of like,
protagonist in the game.
I can't remember who I was talking to about this because it was about a week ago. It might have been Adam from RPS, but it was kind of about the fact that you are like I think it was to do with maybe MOBAs and the sort of not exactly equivalent, but of football, and how you get sort of all of this sort of adulation and star power, particularly in the like striker positions, you know, because it's equivalent to like a mid or a carry, or you know, it's someone where you can
put it in
kind of
terms,
point to
understand.
the goal score like sheet and sort
they
of
have
go,
they have a really good KD.
yeah, basically. Whereas, you know, I'm kind of interested to see whether you can make Alex Hunter just a really solid left back, you know, like just, you know, really reliable.
Yeah, I don't know how the actual game part of that campaign is going to work, because will you still control the entire squad like you do in FIFA? Because that's...
I honestly don't know.
Well, no, they didn't say, but
Yeah.
that's the sort of interesting thing where it's like, do you control that guy's career, but by... Or is it more like a story thing where it's like the actual matches are like
Or
quick
do
time
you
events?
have to be like his agent or something and like manage crises? Or like,
God
who
knows.
knows? And then I started imagining like what footballers' wives the game would be like, because that would be amazing. But yeah, I assume that's DLC at some point.
Well, I mean, FIFA, you know, it's nice to see them make a brave decision with the franchise that you can literally just do the same every year and it's fine.
Yeah.
And equally for games to be telling a story that's not about war,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's pretty much all we have to say about the EA conference, to be honest, because they didn't show enough Star Wars for me to be excited. And that doesn't even take very much.
No.
We've seen Battlefield 1 before. That's what it...
It might sound really weird, but I was really hoping for like a Sims thing. Like,
Yeah, I wonder what they're up
I don't
to.
know what, but I was just kind of like hoping that there might be just like something totally out of left field that nobody had sort of been, speculating about on the internet, and it would just be like, here's The Sims 5.
Yeah. There's a lot about initiatives, like their charity drives and stuff like that, which is all great, but yeah, maybe
And
a bit
their
short
indie program and stuff.
Featuring terrified Norwegians and Scandinavian men of all kinds. Universally frightened. And then to Bethesda, which opened with Quake Champions. Quack. So this, had a little bird whisper that there was going to be a Quake game announced because, Bethesda are really on a roll with this stuff. Like, Wolfenstein The New Order was great. Doom is great. Like, they've done these really successful reboots of these very well-loved shooters. And this is the one where I'm like, because when the rumor was going around that there might be a new Quake game, I was really hoping that they would give it the Doom or the Wolfenstein treatment, which is, like, how do we recreate that single-player experience now? I mean, I guess with Wolfenstein, they completely reinvented it, but they made it into something really spectacular. With Doom, they were just, what does a really modern but faithful Doom sequel look like? Whereas, I really wanted that for Quake, actually, because I think Quake does have qualities that delineate it from Doom, beyond being incredibly brown. It's got this kind of weird Lovecraftian gothic sci-fi vibe, like the first game. I mean, not the more straightforward sci-fi sequels. Like, I kind of want to climb inside, like, the kind of, running around a big gothic space cathedral with a lightning gun.
They really ditched the medieval thing, didn't they, after the first one? The first one was the only one that had, like, old places. And it, like, the first level, I think, maybe of each episode was kind of a futuristic one, and then you got kind of more into the medieval stuff as you progressed through.
Yeah, it was really weird. Like, Quake was strange. Like, it had, like, a lot of hexen in its DNA. And I really liked that about it. This isn't that. So that was the first thing I was like, What it is a multiplayer only kind of aspiring esport, probably drawing more from Quake 3 Arena than the previous Quakes, which has Quake style running and shooting and firing the guns, but with, I guess, Overwatch style character abilities. Based on, it's all the same, basically the skins from Quake 3 Arena are now characters that have...
Yeah. They introduced this weirdly, because it was like Tim Willett saying, we're bringing back Quake and we're going to really focus on everything that made it brilliant, distinctive character classes. Like, what?
Yeah. I think it absolutely didn't have. So that's got me a bit more skeptical, because...
Yeah, it's stuff like, there's sort of no reason to particularly believe that they will do this better than other people. Like, if they're making a pure deathmatch thing where everyone's the same person, then they have a good history of that, and you could at least say, like, well, this will probably be the best one of those, or, like, at least they're the best they can do in that arena. But they're both revisiting something old, and also branching out into a new area where they don't have as much experience in. And so there's no particular reason to think, like, oh yeah, that'll be better than Overwatch at this, or better than TF2, or...
And if they have got some questions to answer, because, like, Quake Live failed spectacularly to sustain Quake as an esport. So it has to do better than that. And maybe changing the formula is a way of achieving that. But simply having characters with abilities doesn't necessarily strike me as, like, the solution to why Quake started esports and then didn't sustain it. So, yeah. Don't know. I really wanted the reveal trailer where it's just a man, like, being chased by a zombie through a big castle.
Nail gunning a shambler.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nailing a shambler.
Feels to me from listening to people talk about it that I don't understand why do this specifically with the Quake franchise. Like, it feels like you could do this with a new IP and just sort of
I think it's more like, if there's any way they can use the old name, then they will.
I mean, there is like, Quake had been so many different things, like, it didn't really we didn't really ever have a consistent sequel. So you have Quake 1, which is like a medieval gothic sci-fi horror shooter. Then you have Quake 2, which is a more straightforward sci-fi shooter. Then you have Quake 3, which is a multiplayer only arena shooter set in space. then you have Quake 4, which is now a modern military shooter sci-fi thing.
I'd sort of forgotten about Quake 4 until this. Now I'm remembering, I think I played like most of that game.
So, you can go, what if a new thing again? But yeah, given the precedent for reboots and revivals, I wanted my Quake 1 back.
Yeah, I mean, I see why they have attached it to a franchise that people still feel fondness for if they want to do anything at all. And sort of not have to get over the hump of initial buy-in, I guess. But, like, just in terms of having listened to what people like about Quake previously and then hearing the proposal for this, it was kind of like that there are a lot of joins that will need shoring up, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, I just need to be resold on it because I'd sort of sold myself on what I thought it was going to be, which is not necessarily their fault. Then there was some stuff about the Elder Scrolls. It sort of crept into the reveal of Skyrim Special Edition, which is a HD remaster of Skyrim for the next-gen consoles, but also for PC. It introduces mod support to the consoles, which is interesting in and of itself. But yeah, I just think it's a cool thing to have happened. Probably not the Elder Scrolls game everyone would be clamoring to see a proper HD revival of, but...
Oh, right. Also, people were sort of, I think, probably clamoring to see a new Elder Scrolls game. And they did, I think Todd Howard said something about, like, they are working on that, but it's, more than a year away. It's, like, far future.
Yeah. Might be a reveal for next year, maybe.
Because that was the one thing I wondered, there was a rumour about Skyrim HD remake, and it didn't sound likely to me, because it seemed like a strange thing to do, because it doesn't feel like that long ago, although I guess it was.
It was 5 years ago.
And also, like, Fallout 4... one of the reasons, it doesn't sort of look massively better than Skyrim. And one of the reasons that it didn't really excite me personally, and I think some other people, was that it didn't look that different to Fallout 3 either. And so that kind of like lack of sort of visual jump just made it less appealing overall. And I was thinking, like, if you're planning your next Elder Scrolls game, you probably don't want Skyrim to look nearly as good. It'd probably be better if it, like, to jump straight into something that looks dramatically better than Skyrim. And maybe they still will, in a year's time or whatever.
I think it appeals to me partly because I can't be asked to mod all those graphics stuff back into Skyrim again. I did hear an interesting thing, which is if it supports 64-bit architecture, which Skyrim didn't, then apparently that's going to be a huge help to current big mod projects, like the people building Morrowind in Skyrim. So ironically, its existence might make it easier for someone else to make the Morrowind remaster that the people who were disappointed by this want. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Then, Prey.
Yeah.
Re-announced.
That was... so I'd heard rumours for ages that was Arcane's other project, in addition to Dishonored 2. And it turns out to be true. And it's not the Space Bounty Hunter one that was, in development for a while. This one, they showed a pretty enigmatic trailer of, like, it's mostly intro, of a guy who has some kind of mundane job in the future, and his eye is going slightly red. And then one day... He
looks quite a bit like Graham.
Looks a lot like Graham. And then one day he wakes up in a space station orbiting the moon, and they're doing tests on him, and he's got to escape. And the trailer kind of shows, I couldn't even really tell what was going on, but it looked like he was shooting at some, like, annoying little black head crabby things that were also made of smoke or something, which didn't look a lot of fun to do. It wasn't like gameplay, it was just cinematic, but, yeah, they didn't show enough that to make me sort of really intrigued. I sort of trust them quite a lot. Like Raf Colantonio, who's co-creator of Dishonored, was on stage and said that, like, the thing they do well is basically first-person immersive sims, and so they're doing one of those. So that's good news. But they didn't really show any of that. It was just like, here's what the rough theme is, and the rough theme wasn't. I just played too many games where I've been abducted to a space station and there's some weird alien things going on. Like, that premise is the oldest one in the book, virtually. Also, I'm annoyed.
I don't know, reclaiming your heritage. That's pretty high up there, I'd say.
Yeah. I'm annoyed that it's called Prey. Like, I'm always annoyed when someone announces a new game that's called the same thing as the other game. But this is especially bizarre because there's only one other game in the Prey franchise, and it's also called Prey. Like, there hasn't been like a Prey 2 or a Prey 3. It's just, there was Prey, and now there's Prey.
Prey 2, Prey harder.
Well, that's the thing is, so, okay, I mean, by all accounts, Prey 2.
Oh my god, they could have called it Eat, Pray, Love.
That has to be the name of an achievement. Because Prey 2 was the space bounty hunter game that was shown, was reportedly didn't work and was going to fail. So they gave it, what I'd heard was that they'd given it to Arcane to fix, to make that game work. And presumably they went, nah, we can't fix this. But what we can do is remake the entire franchise as something completely different. Which is weird. The reason I think to be excited about it is if Dishonored proved that they could do Thief Deus Ex, then maybe this is them doing System Shock, BioShock.
Yep.
That's the vibe I got from it. Wasn't like that end of the immersive sim. Sorry, the Thief end of the immersive sim. It was definitely System Shock, I think. Because, and also like there's sort of the implication of some time skipping philosophical weirdness.
Or something.
Yeah. Which fits within the kind of stories what Ken Levine might tell.
I think they called it a psychological horror.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah,
Psychological thriller, actually.
It's cool that it's cool that Arcane are doing more, given that they've set such a strong precedent for themselves now. Which brings me easily to Dishonored 2.
Yeah, that's good.
Does look good. Of which way more was shown. Yeah.
Yeah, they did. Quite a big presentation on it. Like sort of like in a bunch of different sections. So like the first one was just sort of scenery, basically, just like here's what the new place looks like. And then they had like a whole bit on story, and they showed I think a big chunk of the intro to the game. And then some actual like taking people out. It's really funny because I just recently watched a Dishonored like stealth kill montage. There's a YouTube channel called I think Stealth Gamer or something.
Stealth Gamer BR maybe.
Yeah, who's like super good at Dishonored, and I think they've been doing this for ages. But there was one putt going around recently that was just like ridiculous, like drop kills from 300 feet and all that stuff. But also like loads of stuff about like sort of intentionally getting into fights with people like in a non-stealthy way, so that you can cut their head off. So you can pick up their head and then throw it at someone else to knock them into like a light field and stuff. But in between like all that stuff, that it's incredibly fluid and incredibly fast. And then watching Dishonored 2 being demoed, it looks really like slow and tame by comparison, because obviously they're not doing like all the trick kills, and they want to move slowly and show you, like, make sure you understand each thing they're doing. And so that's kind of weird. Like I would always be tempted if I was them to like get that guy in and say, hey, you play it for a while, and like show people the nutty stuff you can do. They
do get those people in to test it.
Right.
I always talk to, because those demos are performed by one of the designers, Dinga Bakaba, who I talked to when I was at Arcane, and he was saying that they not only watch those videos, they get them in to test stuff. And they're the people who pick up on like, the cooldown delay on this blink is exactly 0.3 seconds too long for me to do this thing I want to do, and stuff like that. Which is kind of rad. It was nice to see a little bit more of the story stuff, like, because what I had seen already was the Dust District mission that they showed in the gameplay stuff that they did show. I saw more of it than they showed at E3. But the things I hadn't seen was like the intro to the game, where something presumably goes wrong when we pick between Corvo and Emily. Like, hearing Corvo speak is really cool.
They also showed like a disused mansion where you can look through time. Which, when they introduced it, I thought, oh god, this doesn't sound good, because the first thing Harvey Smith said was, so it's a mansion where like some kind of magical thing is going on, and that's disabled all your powers. I'm like, oh no, don't disable all my powers. But then it seems like it is like a one-off set piece, and you wouldn't be able to do all your normal tricks in it, but it's looks like at least a gameplay focused set piece, so it's not like a purely story thing. You're in like a mansion that is now disused and all overgrown and everything, but you have some kind of special gadget that has kind of like 3 bits of glass sticking up from it, and through those you can see the past when it was lush and also guarded. And I guess you've got to get past like certain areas that are now blocked off, used to be accessible in the past, but in the past there are guards. So you kind of peer into the past through these panes of glass to see where the guards are, then ambush them, and then go back into the present to like avoid their patrols and stuff. So it's like, from their perspective, it's like you can just vanish. And from your perspective, it's kind of like you get to plan, you get to strike whenever you want, but you've got this kind of limited window into their world, and there's like puzzles to solve and stuff.
Yeah. There's a really nice moment. I think it's actually in the trailer rather than in the demo, where you see from Emily's perspective, Corvo like kill 3 people. And it's really something they don't do at all in the original game is show you what it looks like when Corvo's using his abilities and you're not him. Because he's just like gets attacked by a guy with a sword and then instantly he's behind the guy who was just attacking him, like impaling him on his sword, but the guy next to him's head falls off. Which is just a great, I don't know, just as a Dishonored fan, it was such a cool, like, escalation of what that series has done in the past. Not to fanboy out too terribly, but it was just nice to see it shaping up so well, and that it's out relatively soon. I think I got so much time in Bethesda's conference because, honestly, they don't have a lot this year. Really. Like, they've got Dishonored, I guess, and
that's in November, yeah.
And that's in November, so yeah. Exciting. Then on briefly, to the PC gaming show powered by PC Gamer. Brilliant use of words.
Yeah, strangely.
Because we are all running on little wheels underneath.
It's AMD presents the PC Gaming Show powered by PC Gamer. You would
yeah.
think it would be PC Gamer presents the PC Gaming Show powered by AMD. So
yeah.
Make things that power things.
That's probably not how sponsorship works.
No. Thought Day 9 did a good job again.
Yeah, he's a wonderful man. A really wonderful man. Yeah, and it from my point of view, felt like it went better this year. Like, I thought it was, I liked what we tried to do with it last year, and it's always a strange thing to do because the things people traditionally moan about in E3 is it's like, it's all sequels, it's all big AAA bollocks, where are the smaller games, where are the more inventive games, and so on. And on the PC, it's really easy to find that stuff, and most of the games we have at the show are indie games, games from middleweight publishers, some sequels, but also a whole bunch like Dawn of War 3 and stuff, but also like just a load of indie games in a row, like, well, we've made this, we're announcing this. And so people complain that there aren't any big announcements because we haven't announced the next sequel to a AAA game. So you kind of can't win with E3, I think, but I think but Day 9 does an amazing job, I think, in that.
It's a cool, role. It's extremely PC. It's a, sort of like Arma 3 DLC and, Killing Floor stuff and Ark survival stuff, which is like a load of things that are really popular on PC, and like there are huge numbers of people who are super excited about that. Mountain Blade as well, but which you would never see at any other E3 show. Never get the limelight like that, which is
people
really cool.
demanding Warframe.
But then there's because it's the only PC gaming show. Like, all PC gamers' hopes are pinned on that. Like, there's so many people who are like, where's Gay Ben? Why isn't Half-Life 3 being announced here? And, the biggest publishers on PC just, would do their own thing if they wanted to do a thing.
Yeah. And I think the Half-Life 3 thing has gotten a bit, it was frustrating last year because it was every Twitch comment. And it's like, come on. Like, I think at this point, the people to be annoyed at when it comes to that game not happening isn't us for not announcing it. It's the company that you would like to have made it who haven't made it. Anyway, so that was, it was hopefully alright. There are 2 things we wanted to pick out from it. One was the very brief reveal of Clay's new game, makers of Invisible Ink and Don't Starve and Mark of the Ninja, which is called Oxygen Not Included and is a 2D colony building game, space colony building game.
Yeah, you build you're mining an asteroid or digging into an asteroid to build a colony, which was not clear to me really from the sort of 4-second trailer they opted to reveal it with, which was just like virtually a screenshot. It just kind of zoomed out and then showed a load of like warning messages about your people dying for various reasons, but like a million of those, so you couldn't really read them. And then it was just like, well, that's that, I guess. I haven't seen enough to judge, but I was like, when I think of like a new Clay game, I'm thinking about Mark of the Ninja and Invisible Ink, which are both stealth games. And I like Don't Starve, but I've never really got into it. And this just isn't really my wheelhouse, really. There aren't any management games like that I really love. So I keep an open mind, but it's not the kind of super exciting thing I was hoping for.
Certainly looks a lot like Don't Starve, which is a game I never got into, so maybe it's not in there.
Yeah, the art is very similar.
The other thing I wanted to pull out from PC Gamer Show was Dual Universe, which I hadn't heard of, which is the most ambitious game ever made. And in exactly the same way that all of the previous most ambitious games ever made have been, in that it is a huge multiplayer simulation of a shared universe where players build everything.
Single shard, all of those words.
Yeah, all of those words. Looks a bit like the love child of No Man's Sky and Space Engineers. In that you build your own spaceships and then you fly around and you can go to seamlessly from ground to space to planets to space stations and build your own space stations and, you know, create spaceships and sell them to other people. And if you come up with the best design, maybe you'll be the most prolific spaceman in the galaxy. You know, it's Eve with you actually flying the ships and so on, or the same promise to drive Star Citizen and everything else. But actually, you know, they showed, you know, play. It looks like a real thing. And I definitely want to play it. They did keep saying things that are impossible, though.
There was one of the title cards on the trailer was, emergent gameplay, build civilization.
Just build civilization. Just do it. Why not? Just, you know.
What does that emerge from exactly, mechanics wise?
Just build a civilization. It's cool. There was, and then I think it was an offhand comment during the interview was like, oh yes, if you like, you can create a political system. Really? Like, I think my response to that, if I was conducting that interview, would just be like, is that true? No.
I mean,
maybe it is.
If it's massive multiplayer, then in theory, like, people can do whatever they like if they can chat to each other, right?
Yeah,
They can form their own societies or whatever. I guess you could call that emergent gameplay.
You can only chat if you're holding the space conch. I don't know. Like, yeah, it looks super cool. It was that thing where it was like, if they told me this is a single player, it's Minecraft with spaceships and loads of different planets and you can build what you like and there's a built-in economy and NPCs and stuff to interact with, but it's a single player game and I could understand the scope of it.
Yeah.
I'd have been like, oh, this looks fantastic. And it still looks great, but because they have said all of the promise words that never happen.
Yeah.
It hasn't yet maybe convinced me that this is the time it does happen. Which maybe isn't that unfair, but don't know. Some of the actually sort of independent indie things,
The best kind.
unrelated to a show indie things that stood out from E3 that have sort of been floating around, but not at a particular conference. One of them was, I would keep wanting to call it Azubu, Pip. Abzu, not Azubu. The streaming service. Abzu looks good.
I don't actually know the exact pronunciation because it's got a hat, a circumflex over the U. So
Could be anything.
I can't remember what that
Let's
means.
call it Abzu.
Indeed.
Looks good.
Looks good. It looks, it's under the sea and it is very much kind of, exploration. There's no sort of death conditions. There's no lose condition. You just sort of apparently go through the experience at your pace, sort of, I guess, hitting whatever emotional or story notes the developers want you to, hopefully. But the thing is, it's just, the environments are so beautiful and it reminded me visually a lot of what I love about Subnautica in terms of the light, in terms of the sort of that sense of wonder and exploration of like these sea creatures just sort of flooping around or like, well, you know, like jellyfish. That's the word that seemed appropriate. But it does seem to be that they are like earth creatures. Like there were whales in the trailer, there were dolphins, there were not dolphins, killer whales, and there were jellyfish and, you know, all kinds of things, but things that I felt like I recognized, whereas in, for example, Subnautica, they have a lot more in the way of it's all very alien and is supposed to be. But the big difference felt like the way the diver actually moved. It was super kind of like fast and fluid and sort of didn't feel like a person struggling with current. It felt far closer to how you would imagine a fish would move or how you would imagine like somebody who was like almost like a mermaid almost. Or so, you know, is that kind of like affinity for sea motion.
Affinity.
And there was a really interesting blog post on their dev blog on the Giant Squid website, which sort of explained a bit more about how they got that stuff to work, and how, I think their phrasing was something like how to make the swimming not feel quite as swimmy, because I think that they obviously understand that there are a lot of problems inherent with, you know, underwater levels and things in games, and so it was about trying to work out solutions to those kinds of things. But it looks like there's story to it that might be closer to something like Endless Ocean, if either of you guys have played that. That sort of starts as a relatively like, hey, go diving, you know, explore, you know, these particular habitats, and you do that over the course of the game, but there's also kind of more of a mystical element that creeps in, and more of a sort of story that you find yourself moving through. So yeah, like I'm wondering if it will end up somewhere between the two, because it's not got the base building, and it does seem to be about the exploration, but that sense of wonder that I love about Subnautica is there.
There's people from the Journey team involved, so which gives it a little bit of context.
Austin Wintory's soundtrack sounds rather good. From I believe that was what was on the trailer. It would not make sense if it wasn't. So
Indeed. Pip, would you say that the under the sea is to you what the space is to me?
Darling, it's better down where it's wetter.
There isn't a Disney film about spaceships to their internal loss, so unfortunately I can't retort.
I don't know. I think when it goes right, yes. But it's not enough to sell itself to me on its own.
Right.
It's enough to guarantee my interest, but if it feels like they've done it wrong, or if it traps me in some way...
I feel the same way about space.
Okay, in that case, yes.
The other game that I saw just on Twitch actually was Absolver, which is a sort of passively multiplayer melee combat RPG being made by some former Ubisoft devs. I've actually forgotten the name of their studio. It looks amazing, like beautiful animation. It's proper human scale, kind of human proportion figures, but they're quite abstract. Like everyone's wearing masks, and they have like kind of like almost like ceremonial clothing on, and they're in this sort of like very hand drawn kind of classy animation, looking kind of ancient fantasy ruin world. But the offset against that kind of like, you know, painterly style is this combat system where it actually looks like people fighting, like elegant fighting. It's not like a pub brawl, but like blows actually connecting and parries actually being in the right place, and like a proper fight. It also includes sword combat, which is why it caught my eye, because sword fighting. But on top of that, like I watched a bit of their demo, and it has loads of cool ideas in it. So you can play it co-op with friends. But or you can play PvP, and you can kind of, go to dedicated activities for PvP or to do a dungeon, I guess, or something like that. But all of these things are triggered through an overworld where other players are just sort of seamlessly folded into your experience, a bit like in Dark Souls. So you're walking around, you see somebody, then you have emotes, and you can kind of challenge them or go to work with them or whatever. And friendly fire is always on, to the extent that you can have friendly fire when you're kicking. But, which is super exciting, to me, because I just love the idea of, I like it in Dark Souls anyway, those moments of like gesturing to people across using emotes to try and, you know, express an idea. Same with, even Dark Souls. Not Dark Souls, even something like Overwatch, where you start to use emotes to kind of like have those little moments of interaction with people. I think is really nice, and building a game around that sounds really cool. The other thing is they only showed a little bit of this, but the combat system looks fucking awesome. So not only do you have like, you know, controller pad button style combos and stuff, you kind of plan what those combos are by creating a combat deck where you establish what the run of your abilities will be by like collecting cards that you then slot in. So like the third attack in my combo is a back fist, whereas it could be a low kick, and you swap things in and out to build your own little playstyle. It sounds really, really cool. So yeah, I'm dead excited about it now. Like that stood out to me as one of the surprises.
While we're still talking about things that have happened during E3 week but aren't anchored to the conferences or indeed E3 itself. I just wanted to mention the Morphe's Law trailer that I was watching just before we were recording this, actually. And it's looks like a team-based competitive shooter, but the idea is that the more you hit opponents, the larger the body part that you are hitting on them grows on you. So, for example, if you're really good at getting headshots, it makes you more vulnerable to headshots because you end up with an enormously inflated head. Or
awesome.
Or
I think it shrinks them as well because like the worst players end up small.
Yeah. But apparently they can then go into like other bits of the levels that you can't usually get to because they're so tiny. They can like, almost like a mouse in a skirting board.
And then it's team based and you have like an avatar for your team that it's like a giant man who is the sum total of all of your body masses. And because, just as a natural consequence of that system, if you shoot your teammates, doesn't have to worry about like whether friendly fire is happening or not because it will grow you and shrink them, so the team balance is still the same. And so you can intentionally shoot your teammates to like make them smaller so they can get through those gaps. And then
it looked really cute. Like there was a whole bunch of
mental.
like next level strats that could probably like engender, or like if someone was amazing and they were therefore like inflating at a massive rate, maybe you could take that fire away from them so that it made them less vulnerable and they could keep sort of racking up those headshots and stuff. I don't know, like it just, I don't know how it will be in practice, obviously, but it just seemed like such a simple idea that was just absolutely fascinating and had so many possibilities attached. And I don't think it was part of E3 in any way, shape or form. I think it just was fine. If we're all going to release some games or some game news, then why don't we? But yeah.
They like, because you grow individual limbs, like someone discovered, I think, like vastly inflating their feet meant that when they run up to people, they just accidentally like kick them into space.
Oh, I think that was in the thing, because like you see a body go flying like way out into the desert away from the main like play hub area.
That's rad. I want that to be an esport. I just want the situation where someone's seriously intoning, well, they've got to turn this around now, but his head is massive. But back to the show. Next was Ubisoft, who opened with Ghost Recon, The Wildlands.
To be fair, they opened with Just Dance.
They opened with the dancing giraffe,
which is
performance of Queen or something.
Made us switch over from
the PC gaming show.
It was what made you make us switch over from PC gaming.
Yeah. As a man softly talks about armour.
Wasn't it Warren Spector at that point?
No, he was later.
Afterwards, looked like a TED talk.
He was later. Ghost Recon Wildlands, which is actually reminded me a lot of GTA multiplayer. Obviously with like a Tom Clancy theme, but the same kind of open world, mixed vehicles, do objectives.
And apparently the plot is like a Mexican drug cartel have taken over all of Bolivia. Like just the whole country. And now the entire thing is just all drug dealers making cocaine, so it's okay to shoot them all.
There's a most strenuous introduction to that. Where it's like, the coca leaf is tremendously important to the nation of Bolivia, both ceremonially and in culture and medicine and food. But what if it was taken over by baddies who now make the first narco state? And like, yes, no, that is a fine back of an airport paperback premise onto the dirt bikes and helicopters.
It looked really cool. I was slightly surprised by the way they played it, which was like, they sort of said they were going stealthy, but they would just like open fire on a group of people, and in a way that, the other guards would like see that happening and react and shout and shoot and stuff, but then it didn't seem to alert the rest of the camp.
We were both really confused by one of their choices, which was to take out the guy doing the press-ups. And you were like, oh, it makes sense because otherwise he was going to get really strong.
Yeah, you got to kill him before he gets too buff.
Well, no, because he was just going to get really tired.
You got to kill him as his tiredness peaks, but before his buffness peaks.
Given that
I don't think that's a mechanic. It's not actually like Morphe's Law.
No.
But it so the sort of unique thing about it was just like the sort of scale of the thing. Like they were approaching this encampment from like a mountain or something, and then they'd sneak into this building, get some intel from that guy, and tell them they got to go across the country. And so they just do go across the country, like as a group of 4 or 5 of them, stealing motorbikes and helicopters and stuff. And then they raid some other encampment and like time their snipes to, take people out simultaneously in a way that I'm sure wasn't necessary because the two people they were taking out couldn't see each other. But,
it
then
seemed like a
some
really weirdly organised playthrough, actually. Like,
yeah,
it was the traditional
so
Ubisoft
weirdly false.
actors.
Yeah.
actors pretending to be your friends.
But
It always feels a bit like being in the Truman Show.
But they took it so seriously that I actually didn't know that it was supposed to be voice comms at first. I thought it was actually just this is the dialogue for this single player bit or this co-op bit, like your characters automatically speak. But then I realized, oh no, this is supposed to be players talking. And then, so the last bit of the mission, I think they're taking out some kind of target and, they need to abduct a target, like a scientist, and he gets in a car and drives away, so they have to give chase. And then there's like one of them on a bike, one of them in a Jeep, one of them in a helicopter, all trying to chase the same car and trying to run it off the road without killing him. And, that just spills off across the Bolivian countryside for miles and miles. And that was really cool, just seeing like it being this vast playground for that kind of stuff, whilst being still focused missions.
Kind of I will play it, I think. It'll be, a bit like GTA multiplayer. It feels like one of those things where if you get friends together for an afternoon, it would probably be quite a lot of fun, but.
I don't know, I think I like GTA's sort of sense of silliness or space for silliness, whereas this didn't feel like it necessarily had that. And it might have just been to do with the way that they'd set up the voice comms. Like it kind of, I think you could not have sapped
don't play
more
with these guys.
personality from that game if they tried. But I like that you can just sort of take a break from whatever you're doing in multiplayer, like not heists or anything, but like, if you're just sort of tooling around in the world to go and just, not abseil, but like paraglide off the Hollywood sign, or like race each other on bikes down a hill.
Yeah,
or,
I'm sure you can do that in this. To me, it appealed because it was like somewhere between the GTA free play and the GTA heists. Because to me, the heists are too restrictive, where it's like, in this bit of the heist, you must defend against waves of cops, and in this bit of the heist, you must take this guy out, but not if this guy sees. And in free play, it's much more liberal, but then there's no focus, and you just have to make your own fun, and that's fun too. But I like the idea of sort of like almost Splinter Cell type missions, where it's kind of up to you how you do it, but you do have a particular mission, and you've got to like get this objective, and then you can play out differently depending on how it goes.
Next up, and there was a bunch more, but the next thing that really stood out to me, at least, was Star Trek Bridge Crew VR. So they have made Artemis Bridge Simulator.
The Artemis Bridge Simulator.
We can't decide if it's Startemis or Artemis.
They've made the Artemis Bridge Simulator with the Star Trek license.
I mean, in fairness, Artemis is a huge rip-off of Star Trek. So.
Yeah, it is.
I like it, I want to play it, and I want LeVar Burton to play it with me.
So, yeah, and they
As
did
do we all.
Yeah, if you were going to announce something like this, the perfect way to do it is to get LeVar Burton to talk about it, which is actually great. Like, as far as celebrity endorsements go, that one makes 100% sense. And hear him talk about accidentally drifting into the way he would speak when he was being Johnny
It was really sweet, actually. Like,
Yeah.
actually, Tyler was asking him about like what it's like to be captain, because he played an engineer on the show, and he said that he actually like had to keep reminding himself that he was captain to actually like issue orders and stuff, because he'd slip back into his engineering role of just waiting for people to tell him what to do.
I think the biggest issue is simply that it's a VR game. So, we need to find 4 people. Presumably it's an online thing, but we still need to find, a bridge crew full of people who all own VR headsets.
It's a cool enough thing that I can imagine like organising an evening around it. But yeah, it is worth sort of bearing in mind what the cost of just setting up a game is going to be.
£1,000.
Yeah, you got to have that many friends with VR, and then you got
to with VR capable PCs.
Like, I'm already at the point where I don't like organising. There are loads of games that I probably enjoy, but I just can't. I'm not often in a situation where I can say, yes, I'll be free for 2 hours on this night, and I'll be in the mood to play this thing. And then if playing that thing also involves setting up my VR and wearing a headset and clearing the space and stuff, that's going to be even more of a like commitment, but it could be super cool.
I think a big factor for me would be, and maybe we'll get to this on the VR stuff more broadly, but so if it's on multiple VR platforms, which they did basically say that they said that it would be, but they didn't specify which, all of the Ubisoft VR stuff, and there's quite a lot of it, including an Eagle capture the flag deathmatch game.
Oh, I want that to be the next esport.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
just like dragging a rabbit around Paris.
Yeah, exactly. They said if that includes the cheaper options like Razer's new thing and the PlayStation VR, that'd be good.
And
Secondly,
maybe the Gear VR.
I think Gear VR is too much of a
I
stretch.
suppose because
it's a phone, so.
All right.
But like, well, what I mean is like the low
phones in the future.
well, what I mean is it's not actually. Gear VR isn't. Is Gear VR the one that is?
It attaches to your phone.
Yeah. That I think is probably a step too far down the ladder. But what I'd say is if you can do cross-play between the Oculus Rift and the Vive, or the Oculus Rift, the Vive, and the PlayStation VR, then that makes it far, far more likely to succeed.
Yeah, if you can't, it's kind of boned.
It's fucked, yeah, because it's like, we all need Vives.
Yeah.
Because and also that will create
Oculus.
such a shitty competition system where it's like, what do my friends have, even if I want the Vive, whatever. So yeah, concerns, but it looks awesome. Wanted to mention For Honor briefly again. It was shown last year, and I immediately signed up for the beta last year. This is their Pirates. I was going to say Pirates versus Vikings versus Knights, which is a Half-Life mod.
That's pretty close to this, actually.
Yeah, which is a Half-Life mod. What I mean is Vikings versus Knights versus Samurai. Like third-person melee combat game, which is I thought it was going to predominantly be a multiplayer thing, which looked really cool. It's kind of Dark Souls-y combat, somewhere between Dark Souls, God of War, and Rise, Son of Rome, for anyone who played that.
Yeah, it was nice to see a thing like this that was just humans. Like, it wasn't fantasy or anything. It's just like these factions fighting each other in very like. It had the kind of I don't know, like almost playful kind of fun-looking combat of a fantasy game, but without all the fantasy. It's just like big burly Viking fighting a big bunch of samurai with a giant axe.
Yeah, it looked really fun. Not groundbreaking necessarily, but I really want to play it. Thence came Watch Dogs the second.
Yeah.
Watch _dogs _2.
It's a weird thing. I never actually played the first one, even though it sort of like sounded in theory like my kind of thing, but then the reports from it were so negative, and I think Graham in particular, like, who enjoyed it in general, but
I got so
his
cross
complaints
with the
were so
protagonist's outfit.
Yeah.
Do you mean you didn't like the iconic hat?
He looked so tedious. Wasn't he wearing like a hoodie and like a bunch of other things? Like he was
Hoodie and a big coat and a hat.
It was like a big collar
It's cold in
jumper.
Chicago.
Yeah.
Like it just felt so. I think I actually read an article about how over designed he was as a protagonist and how
Gotta be
awkward
iconic.
it ended up.
This time you're a young actor in San Francisco, who's also a hacker, and you've been falsely accused of something, and so you've got to hack everything in the universe.
Kill a load of people to prove that you were falsely accused of whatever that thing is you didn't do.
I'm sort of looking forward to it because presumably they're going to fix a bunch of basic shit about Watch Dogs, and they particularly make a big deal of like how hacking is less of a binary thing now. Like in Watch Dogs, you just sort of like hack into a forklift truck and activate it to make the thing go up, and that was useful in some circumstances. But this time, anything like that you can hack into, you just freely steer it and do whatever you like with it and drive it around. And they showed a mission that kind of looked cool visually, where you're on the roof of some like big airy glass windowed office that is being used for celebration of a senator, I think. And you're on the roof, on a crane on the roof, and you send out a little drone to scout it out, and flying a drone around this kind of extremely well lit level, basically. It's almost like no clipping through a level because you get to see through the walls because they're glass walls. And you can move freely because you're a flying drone. And the idea of like scouting out a place like that and deciding how you're going to approach it is really, really appeals to me. But then when he did approach it, like he threw some gadgets around and distracted some people, but then it just got out an AK and just started mowing people down, and just it turned into like a
What was the thing that guard barked when...
So he throws a gadget over, and the woman just goes, "There's something over there," and walks over there. It's like, wow, literal bark of the year.
Like also,
I've been distracted.
Their attempt at... I don't remember Watch Dogs 1 being this bad, but their attempt at, like, hacker culture
Oh god, yeah.
stuff, like, hacktivism is, like...
The man with...
Alice was really fond of it, but only because it sort of she feels like it's going full Hackers the movie.
I don't think it's ironic.
It doesn't have that sense of fun, really. They're so, like, po-faced
Well,
about...
that's the thing. I got excited to see it, to sort of see that sense of it. And it had it at the very beginning. And then as soon as the guy was in the apartment just murdering and kind of being a dick, but not in a particularly inventive way, it was just like...
Yeah. But it was like, it's somewhere between, like, Banksy and Anonymous is where they've staked their kind of, this is what your hacker group are. And I'm really terrified that they're going to expect you to sympathize with them.
Yeah.
Because they really come off as total wankers.
You can already join them online as, like,
It's called Dead Sec
social
with
thing.
3. Which also feels like a kind of goon squad thing, like, sounds like a Eve thing. Like,
I'd just come from playing Mirror's Edge 2, which is full of douches, and then to see the guy who has individual, like, LCD screens on his glasses so that he can show, like, his eyes as hashtags and do, like, winks when one of them turns into an underscore.
Maybe?
It was fucking...
And,
did all of them.
He had, like, a studded, like...
That's the beauty of the screen pip. It can be all the obnoxious things.
Oh, my goodness. Weirdly, that sort of thing keeps almost selling it to me, but then I see the gameplay footage and I'm a bit like... This feels sort of repellent is too strong a word, but They
don't really tell you on, like, what you're taking down. Like, why is it, like, I can get behind the idea of, oh, you're a hacker taking down a Trump-esque kind of political candidate, but, like, pulling out a 3D printed gun to just kill the people guarding his office makes you the baddie.
Mm.
You know? Like, pretty unapologetically. So, yeah. It doesn't need combat. Why surely
if it just had no lethal weapons, it'd be great.
If it was a big episode of the A-Team where you can use gadgets and stuff to knock everybody out on your way to doing whatever, that's fine. But I think guns are a huge mistake.
Yeah.
Unless it's rubber bullets. Very Nathan Barley. That group of people. A little bit Nathan Barley, a little bit how did you do, fellow kids? And then finally, they closed off the Ubisoft show, as they always do, by announcing a new game. And it is called Steep. And it is a, like, mixed extreme sports, open world, multiplayer game set in the French Alps. And I thought it looked fucking rad. And the reason for that is essentially that it's like, it is the non-violent use of all the technology they've been building.
Yeah.
Like, there's wingsuiting in Far Cry. Skiing isn't far off. If you want to go, like, paragliding and stuff, that's in those games as well. But those games are also like, they're either Tom Clancy games or Far Cry, gritty open world adventures and stuff. And this is basically the same technology, but it's just like, what if the entire game was sports and was just sliding down mountains because that's what's fun about it. And I'm actually really into that. Like, I like snowboarding games anyway, and I like, those environments anyway. But the idea of having this big sort of contiguous open world that you just load into with your mates and just tit about playing with physics, basically, which is all skiing is. I don't know, it appeals to me. Nice use of their tech.
Yeah. I'd like to slide down a mountain. The snow was good.
Cooler on it than I was.
You like, when you go down like a particularly thick bit of snow, like the track you carve out of it looks really good. I like the idea of an open world that's kind of non-violent and you just go around having fun with it. I guess this is more sports focused or I don't know. I think I want to do that and then like make a campfire and like settle down for the night or something. Like I kind of want to mix with survival rather than just pure.
I just want to get battered in a chalet afterwards.
I think, I guess just the fantasy of it is not super appealing, but just like, it's just going on a sports holiday. Which is a cool thing to do, but in a video game, I want more excitement.
I guess, because I really loved things like Wii Sports Resort and stuff, where it is that you are, doing things over and over again, like different activities and sort of trying to maybe beat your own time or sort of achieve just some thing that you particularly want to. And so I think this fits within that for me in a neat way. Like I like the idea of just sort of trying to best your particular time or your run or whatever else like that. I should probably have been paying a bit more attention, but I couldn't get a feel for whether it was VR or not.
No.
Was it?
No.
Oh, okay. Because I was wondering whether...
Well, it might have a VR component, but I don't think so.
Well, because the first-person stuff, like, I was trying to work out, like, I guess, not exactly the appeal, but it felt so much like it was being pitched as a VR showcase, and then... But it never was. Like, obviously no one was in headsets because it wasn't a VR game, and so I sort of walked away from it thinking, I feel like I've just been pitched VR without anybody using those words or putting it in a virtual reality environment. I don't know.
It would be cool if it was. I don't think it needs to be.
I don't think it needs to be, but I think it's more that it was interesting to me that the way that they presented it made the part of my brain that goes, oh, okay, they're talking about VR, sort of switch on. And I think it was a combination of the footage that they chose to show, but also how they made the first person view operate. Like when you come in to land on like a little needle of rock on a mountain when you're gliding in, and sort of I guess everything about that felt like it was designed to work in VR, from the fact that you don't really land realistically, but it would probably feel right if you were standing up, to just sort of the way the viewpoint worked. I think it just sort of made me switch over into VR mode.
I have to admit I didn't get that sense from it, but actually that moment when they land on the rock made me flinch because they land so quickly. And it's obviously like just setting up for a skiing run or something. They land so quickly that it was like, oh god, that's 2 broken knees. But yeah, like I don't think I could do that in VR. I think that would.
Yeah, well, because I was like wondering whether that was because people would feel sick landing really in VR, if you see what I mean. Like if they tried to replicate how your body would actually move. I think that because that felt so jarring, I was like, oh, they've probably done it for.
Right, I see. Yeah.
For that.
Based on how fast it is, though, I think I would vomit myself. Inside
yes,
all the way out. But yeah, I'm just glad. I like that they used their final slot, their big announcement thing, not to announce another Tom Clancy game, which has been for the last couple of years, or a Far Cry game, but something A, new, and B, non-violent, interesting, social, pretty, lovely mountains.
Yeah. They did leave us with that thing on the card on screen that told you about their schedule for the week, and I think on one of the nights it was Tom Clancy's night.
Yeah.
And it felt like when a dodgy bar advertises ladies night, and it's just like you can get
It's
in
Tom Clancy's night,
if you bring
and
one of
the
his
feelings,
novels
right.
or, like I had that
To
in my
kill
head for
the
ages.
president.
So but
Also
like like trashy sort of military novels are go.
Yeah, the EMP cocktail. Microsoft also done a conference, and Microsoft's conference, despite being a console platform holders conference, where they announced the new mini Xbox and then the soon off later on future big Xbox.
big box.
Because everything they're doing, one of the big technologies they announced is like cross-platform everything, Xbox One and Windows 10, save files, transfer, and all of this. Like most of the games they announced are actually PC games, which is a weird situation to be in. So there's loads of previously console games and now PC games. This was the first big showing for Gears of War 4, which is actually Gears of War 5. But there's the middle one written by Tom Bissell that no one talks about. And as someone who's a huge apologist for that series, feels like its time has been and gone. Like, Gears of War was good because it kept getting bigger and sillier, and to just go back and do another one is, I don't know. I don't know if I'm necessarily...
Yeah, nothing about it.
For that. Yeah. No strong feelings.
Tell my wife hello.
Yeah, exactly. Neutral planet for Gears of War 4. And there's a bunch of other things that We Happy Few stood out.
Yeah, that looked really cool. There'd been like a trailer. Did they do a Kickstarter? I feel like they did a Kickstarter.
Yeah.
With a trailer that was...
I'm fairly sure they did. And I played it in some format. Might have been an alpha build or a beta build. I'd need to look it up. But I played it and I didn't love it. Like, I was so sort of into the aesthetic of the world and sort of really keen on the sort of, you know, it felt like sort of 70s British sci-fi kind of overtones of The Prisoner, but, you know, with that sort of menacing surreality that I remember from watching those shows. And then it just sort of turned into this thing that was a bit boring and a bit like...
Was it like after the intro? Like, because the thing I've seen is, this time is that you start off as like in some kind of office and you forget to take your pill or fail to take your pill in some way, and you start to see kind of things as being less rosy than they appear, and there's a strong sense that you're seeing how things really are and everyone else is delusional. And then you sort of go back to a party or something, and you're trying to pretend that you're still on the drug and fitting in with everybody, but they're like beating up a piñata, and you can see that it's really like a dead raccoon or something, and they're eating the flesh from it instead of candy. And so you like vomit, and then they discover that you're not taking a joy pill, and then they chase you out, and you're kind of rumbled from that point.
That feels a lot more like... It sounds really weird to say that you were hoping for a dead raccoon having its flesh eaten, but that feels more like in line with what I was hoping for when I'd sort of... I'd booted it up that time, because what I had was, you know, you start in a kind of an underground bunker, having already sort of been exiled to the place where people who don't take their joy pills are sent. And then sort of it was about trying to, or at least I, you know, then tried to get back into the other bits of town and sort of without raising suspicions, and, you know, you can kind of do crafting, and it's basically a survival game.
Huh.
But and I think that was part of the problem that I had with it, in that you know, there was a lot that survival games do that I don't find particularly interesting, and that's not necessarily their fault. It's just, you know.
How do you like avoid the other, or how do you avoid suspicion with the other people? Can you just walk down the street in front of them, and as long as you like don't do anything weird, they accept you, or do you have to hide from them? Or
I would need to look up what you do. If I remember rightly, I'd really need to go back actually, but I think I remember you could find pills around the place, so I think you might have been able to take those. Although I you know, like I really scraping around in my memory for this, but also I think at that point it was more that if you got seen, you would likely get chased, or, you know, like beaten up by the policemen and stuff like that, and a lot of the like buildings you just couldn't even get into in the first place, or you know, it was I think I must have played it like super early on, but there is a thing that I wrote about it at one point.
Because like it's almost like a game of Invasion of the Body Snatchers, and I'd love a game like that where you kind of have to like everyone else has been replaced by pod people, and you've got to behave like them to blend in, and if you don't, then they'll point at you and do the kind of thing.
Yeah. See, that sounds a lot more interesting, and I'm definitely...
I just want Donald Sutherland to point at me with his mouth agape.
I definitely like would be willing to go back and sort of see how they've changed it and sort of what works differently and stuff. But I think I remember when I did play it, it felt a lot more just sort of like an interestingly pretty, or, you know, like that kind of very specific aesthetic that it has, but with a survival game attached that I wasn't particularly...
Yeah, I didn't know it was a survival game.
That didn't feel like it was elevated in any way at that point, so...
It's more former Bioshock devs, and it really feels like it this time. Like the sort of first-person animation is very reminiscent of those scenes in Bioshock, and also I think they must have some of the same voice actors. I'm sure the kind of like stern, slightly shrill woman who catches you not being joyful is one of the splicers in Bioshock.
Yeah, no, I definitely want to go back and look at that now, because I didn't see the Microsoft conference, so I've just sort of caught bits and bobs.
It's very different to it must be the intro to the game, I guess, before it becomes a survival game. Much more narrative driven. Also confirmed for PC was Platinum's next game, Scalebound, which is apparently a kind of co-op action game where you are a douchebag.
Yeah.
And your friend is a dragon. And you can fight a very big crab in a toilet. Pretty much. So it's got the sort of Platinum, as in Bayonetta and shitloads of great action games. What's it called? Vanquish thing.
Were they DMC as well?
No, that was Ninja Theory.
Oh, okay.
Thing of, kind of mixture of like melee ranged combat and then dragon flying around a dragon, which has got a sort of Panzer Dragoon thing going on. And that all looks kind of cool. And it's got co-op, which looks fun. And, big multi-stage boss battles against huge creatures. Literally, the only reason I'm not excited about it is because the protagonist is a total wank.
Yep.
And the specific reason for it, I think, is they've managed to create a really generic douchebag without sort of adding any of the kind of like weirdness that normally comes into a Platinum game. Like, Bayonetta is probably a divisive main character for a game, but I think she's rad because she's she's funny and weird and threatening, and it's incredibly camp. And so the weirdness of it sort of owns what it is in a way that most games don't, especially of that kind. And then, Devil May Cry is, this, it's a piece of musical theater. It's, the sort of campiest, silliest, most sort of,
Do you say Devil May Cry wasn't by them?
Yeah, I thought. Hang on.
I'm talking about the original Devil May Cry, but Bayonetta shares a lead designer with Devil May Cry, as in part of that lineage. Okay. DMC is not by them. DMC being the Ninja Theory Devil May Cry sequel.
Okay.
Devil May Cry, as in the original Devil May Cry, and then DMC is the Western Devil May Cry, I guess.
Something about the movement of DMC made me think of Bayonetta.
They're in the same lineage completely, same original designers and so on. But
any hoodle.
That's Camille for you. But likewise, Vanquish, which is another amazing Platinum game, is their version of Space Marines, basically. And that's the one where you can slide around on your rocket knees. And there is a button dedicated just to smoking. Where the visor of your helmet flips down, you smoke a cigarette. And the only reason you can do that is because you are fighting Russian robots that track heat. And so you can throw cigarette butts backwards over cover to momentarily. It's completely useless. It's only there because it's cool. And you fight evil space Vladimir Putin on behalf of future space Hillary Clinton with the help of an enormous man called Robert Graves.
Cool.
No, it's Robert Burns. He's actually called Robert Burns. It's amazing. And all their games are weird in that way, and this one isn't. And it's sort of halfway there because you're supposed to be this like young American dude with headphones around his neck and a dragon arm. But he just looks and sounds like a bell end.
Yeah.
And it's really unfortunate because there've been other instances where they've skirted the edge of this character's actually a douchebag. But there's always been something kind of more to it.
You never go full douchebag.
Never go full douchebag. And yeah, it doesn't come off well at all, which is a real shame. Maybe the isolated demo and it'll look better and with further exposure. But yeah, nah. This was followed by Rare's new game. The only other game Pip's dead excited about. Sea of Thieves. Also the sea. This is the cartoon piracy thing. Multiplayer. Yeah. This was another instance of a pretty bad set of bants.
Yeah, it was like community members they'd invited in, and they'd obviously like had them have a really long play session, I think, kind of blind, and then they'd edit it together into like a series of highlights. But they were, I don't know if they've been asked to, but they were really playing it up. They were very much performing their playthrough. It
was, because the game itself looks quite fun. It looks quite janky.
It reminded me of Air Buccaneers, because Air Buccaneers is basically the air version of being on a pirate ship, where you're all on the same vehicle and you have to, cooperate and take different roles to, man it successfully, and it'll probably go horribly wrong. But the water looks great. There's a bit where they all got knocked out of their boat, or the boat got destroyed or something. I think it's sunk and they all had to jump off. And it's that thing where, like, there were lots of games that have, like, big rolling waves and water that's kind of translucent and reflective and all that stuff. But it was kind of different to, like, see players actually in it and going up and down with all of those waves and able to swim through it. And it just looked really nice.
What excited you about it, Pip?
I really liked the playthrough. Like, I thought that the people seemed really sweet.
It did seem sweet. I don't think it was the worst one,
like,
but I did think they were hamming it up a bit.
To be fair, they'd won a competition by being excited about the game.
True.
That's literally how they got to that play session in the first place. So I guess, like, either they're super hyped or that's the persona that they used to win the contest. But, like, I don't know. For me, that felt a lot truer to how we would play. Like, there's a part where where maybe a couple of them take the ship away from the island while not everybody's on board. I can totally see you and, like, some of our other friends doing that, and me just being like, guys, from the sea, you know, from the beach rather, and, like, you know,
or from the sea if you'd enthusiastically followed.
Yeah, exactly. And back. Like there's like a bit where one of them goes to, like, jump onto the boat and misses and falls in the sea, and, like, there's, you know, them getting sort of sunk by the other people, like, who are in the playtest, like, the other crew kind of, like, ruin their day and blow up their ship and it capsizes, and there's, like, one guy in the hold just, like, desperately trying to like hammer bits of wood across, like, a gaping hole in the side where water's coming in. And I don't know, there's something about that level of multiple disasters and sort of, like, entirely user generated disasters, because, you know, like, it didn't feel like it really gave you much in the way of guidance. So you're just like, right, let's go. Let's find some islands. Let's find some treasure, drink some grog, you know, whatever else. And then sort of your own hubris or your own sort of, like, the fact that when the sail unfurls, like the main sail, you can't actually see where you're going. So you have to, like, rely on your teammates to steer you. Like, I can totally see our friends, like, saying, oh yeah, you've got loads of room. Oh, except for over there. I wasn't looking over there.
I suppose that's the thing, like, it does, like, I agree with you, like, maybe I was a bit too harsh on the demo, like, I could totally watch that and imagine what it would be like for us to be doing that. And yeah, I think it was quite cool. It really has a Steam Early Access indie game kind of feel.
The only thing is, I read through all of this, I watched the thing, I got so excited, and then it was like, Windows 10! And I was just like,
these things...
Oh...
Because these things are going to be, like, Windows 10 store exclusives, like, as well, aren't they? They're not going to be on Steam,
yeah,
I don't think.
Like, I assume so. And, like, I'm still doing that thing where my PC is like, do you want Windows 10? Every now and again, in the same way that I imagine a desperate parent, like, coming at you with, open wide for the aeroplane! And you're just like, no! Like, desperately just, like, spitting out, like, lumps of pureed carrot at them or whatever, and just sort of not getting with that particular program. And
there was,
I don't know.
There's a thing that came out
pirate,
in the, some of the Lionhead stuff where they were saying that, like, one of the things that was crippling them on Fable was that they had to be a Windows 10 store exclusive, and they described Windows 10 store as being a disaster and on fire. And that Tomb Raider, I still can't remember what the name of it is. I've played
Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Rise of the Tomb Raider.
Rise of the Tomb Raider
was meant to be, like, one of their flagship titles, and it sold 98% of its copies on Steam. Which is, so if you make something exclusive, I don't think you get a lot more than that 2%. I think maybe you get 4%, but you don't get the 100%.
I just feel like the ask with upgrading to Windows 10 is
I'm never going to do it certainly not for this game, and it would have to be the next Deus Ex. I'd do it for Deus Ex, and that's about it.
I just did it, and Windows 10 isn't
I have it on my laptop, but, there's all kinds of, like, irritation, is it?
I think if you set it up properly and go take the time to do the privacy stuff to disable.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
It's the privacy stuff that really concerns me, and that's why at the moment I've just gone, do you know what? No.
With the right guide, I find it quite easy to disable all that stuff. But
one of the things that scares me about it is that, like, I have managed to avoid the auto upgrade thing. I think I had my settings. It bothered me about it once, and I found the way to turn that off, and it hasn't bothered me about it since. And that seems to be rare. And in particular, it seems like if you have Windows 8, a lot of people just got upgraded without their permission. And so I feel like Windows 7 is probably the last time we'll ever get the choice of whether we upgrade or not. And so after you're on that train, like, it's never going to stop. Like, once you're in Windows 10 land, like, they'll just take you with them wherever they want to take you.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't want to upgrade from Windows XP Service Pack 2, quite frankly.
Those are good days.
I'm still sore about that. So every time it's like, do you fancy Windows 10? I was like, that's 3 more Windows than I'm even mildly okay with.
I think I usually upgrade to a Windows when the next one comes out. Like, I think I upgraded to 7 when Vista came out. And
to be fair, I want Windows 98 or Windows 95 so that I can play my Monet game. Which will not run on any of the, like, backwards compatibility
Ironically,
stuff. It won't work on any of the, like, the virtual OSs that are...
My new PC came with Windows 10, so I don't really have a choice.
yeah, I've got it on my laptop now, also, because I had no choice.
I think it's on my laptop, but I get so angry with it that you have watched me just mashing my hand against the keyboard in rage.
It's
because
Windows 8 on your laptop, isn't it?
I don't know. Anything that isn't Windows 7 and tries to give me a tiled expanse of God knows what with a picture of a zebra on it, I can't deal with it, and I don't want it.
That's
and
Windows
I don't
8.
understand.
That's Windows 8. Windows 10 doesn't have that.
Like, I don't even
Well, it
understand
does, but
its
only if
menu
you-
systems. Like, why won't it just give me a file directory?
Yeah, that
Where's my DOS prompt? What's going on?
That at least is a good thing with Windows 10 if they did go back to not having a stupid grid that doesn't
What
make any sense.
year is this?
But I don't want to be the only Windows 10 apologist, but like I don't think it's that bad as people complain about. But yeah, from Sea of Thieves then to Sony.
That was seamless.
Sea of Sony. I don't know. Who had quite a good show. There's not a lot.
So of me.
Not a lot of PC relevant stuff from the Sony show. I did want to briefly talk about PlayStation VR because this feels like if it works and they're not pulling the wool over people's eyes or it's not like Connect 2, I think it's actually a bit of a coup and will have we were talking about the viability of VR earlier with regard to
The
Star Trek.
viability. Thanks, Tom.
Vivar.
Jesus. With relation to Star Trek, but so they announced that PlayStation VR, which is a headset that works with the PlayStation 4, will come out in October. It'll cost $400, which is substantially cheaper than anything else. It requires the Move controller and the PlayStation camera, which I think are sold separately, but I think you can get that collectively for about 80 quid. So it's initially the cheapest VR option. But the kicker is that unlike Microsoft's thing, which will probably be announced alongside their next console, this allegedly works, and to a fairly high degree of quality, with the PlayStation 4 as it exists now. Which, if that's true, and the demos they showed looked, graphically spectacular, that's actually a big deal, because that means that a console that costs 200 odd quid, and then a VR kit that maybe will 300 quid over here, 350 quid, there is no other cheaper setup. Like that's like it's a combined price that's close to a Vive just by itself without the £1,000 PC you also need to use this stuff.
I guess, but then we also get into the problem of, so if I put on a PlayStation VR headset, will PT be able to get me? Through my PlayStation.
PT, you can't even get it anymore, can you? It's
on my PlayStation, and
why do you, of all people, still have
I am
PT?
very uncomfortable about this.
You're afraid of the end of the PlayStation crossbar menu where PT lives.
Yeah, like I won't go too far along the menu because that's where like you find PT.
The dark corner of the crossbar.
And so if I were to put my headset on, what's to stop PT from coming to me when I don't want it?
It's hard to believe that it's going to be on a par with the Vive Because it's like, one of the big things was just like the PC performance. You need a really good PC just to support VR in any way. And it's hard to imagine what kind of trickery you could do to make the same experience as good on, massively inferior hardware.
It's a funny one because like they're not, it's a lot of the other VR games look very simple, they're very straightforward in order to maximize the frame rate. Whereas for this, like probably the biggest thing they announced was that Resident Evil 7, which is a first person, more like PT, sort of like exploration horror thing with like, not photorealistic graphics, but near photorealistic graphics, will be playable in its entirety on PlayStation VR. And maybe that is a lie. And maybe their standards for what works. Maybe it's going to be a disaster because everything runs at too low a frame rate and everyone's sick all the time. But you would assume, like, the dangers of bad VR are known. Like, people have seen these kinds of peripherals fail before. I'm not saying give them the benefit of the doubt entirely, but it seems mad to me to announce that when you can't do it.
Yeah.
Like, and the other things they showed were, there's a whole bunch of games, some original stuff. The Rocksteady are making Arkham VR, which is going to be a new Arkham game in virtual reality, which, looks like the Arkham games in terms of visual quality. The most important game announced at E3 was Star Wars Battlefront X-Wing VR Mission, which is a virtual reality X-Wing dogfight experience for the PlayStation VR, which is why we're buying one, Pip. And I apologize, but I literally
Look forward to my monologue on becoming an X-Wing widow.
Yeah, exactly. I live there now. I'm gonna buy that. I want it.
It's more the accompanying like X-Wing pilot suit and the accompanying X-Wing pilot chair and the accompanying X-Wing that I'm more concerned.
Look, this is the game. This is the only game I've ever really wanted to exist, and it's only going to be like one VR mission, and that's disappointing. But I'll take it. Damn it. But nonetheless, right? Like they're not promised that, and that's a Frostbite engine, spectacular looking thing using, I assume, Battlefront assets. Like it looks amazing. If they can't do it, this will have, if we get to October, and it's not like, and we're doing this some point down the line, it's coming out and has a price tag. So if they genuinely can't do this, and none of those things work as advertised, this will certainly be the biggest broken promise I've ever seen in E3. Because that involves multiple companies, multiple publishers. Like, if it's a fiction and the technology isn't as good as something like the Oculus Rift, they've fucked it really, really badly.
I mean, it's worth thinking about, like, the first versions of the Oculus Rift that, like, Owen played at E3, like, 2 or 3 years ago. He was blown away by that. He was fucking, like, enraptured with it. And the Oculus Rift, when it was first being demoed, was a thing that was blowing people's minds.
Yeah,
and so that level of VR is still, like, a big deal. And it's not what, like, Valve didn't want to jump into it until it was, like, several generations better than that. And Oculus also have, waited till it's several generations better than that to launch their thing. But a version of VR that is not as, doesn't require as beefy a rig as those things can still be impressive to people. It can, like,
I think, yeah.
It's not completely binary, like it just works or doesn't.
As long as the other console headsets and the other headsets for PC are priced sort of beyond the reach of an easy purchase, it might just well be that people haven't really set up particular expectations like we have, because we've used all of them and have particular preferences or have particular habits or are used to sort of the way that some work and others don't. But I think that perhaps it's a case of if somebody has never tried VR before, or like sort of not since, I don't know, some monstrous headset 20 years ago or something, then this might well just be a kind of a market that doesn't really need to pay as much attention to what the others are doing because they're so far beyond the reach of mortal wallets.
Yeah, but even so, these are presumably Unreal Engine games, definitely a Frostbite engine game, and the other original projects were all proper, modern, high fidelity, look like AAA games. Like, yes, there are gradations in quality, but like, we need a certain frame rate or this doesn't really work. Was one of those things.
Is anyone going to get like heads on with it this week?
maybe. Actually, no, it is on the show. So I guess yes.
So
people,
I
guess
assume
we'll find
that
out.
there will be verdicts.
I might look it up after this if anyone's raving about it. Because if it's
Yeah, I thought there was a thing that people have tried at shows before.
people have tried it before.
Not me.
The feedback I've heard in the past has been very positive. I don't know. Like obviously this is steering away from PC gaming quite substantially, but obviously it's this. If this works, this could be where VR turns out to work as a mass market thing, which is interesting. So the next game, like I was reeling at 2:30 in the morning from the Star Wars thing, to the extent that the next game took me completely by surprise.
Yeah, me too.
Like completely by surprise. Which is
I think you and I watched the whole thing not knowing what it was.
I was in bed.
So
Pip was also totally unaware of what it was.
and they definitely did this on purpose. They showed this game without saying what it was. Because I think rightly, they think people make some assumptions.
Yep.
Which is Call of Duty Infinite Warfare. Because it looks fucking awesome.
Yep.
So, like, we talked about it in the past, and I said I was being quite snarky about it, as I'm probably maybe too inclined to be with Call of Duty, which was that it'll be in space, but it'll only be a bit in space, and so on.
Yeah. We were vaguely positive, I think, last time.
Yeah, but what they showed was very traditional Call of Duty. It looked like a string of set pieces, like fight on the ground, do this, do that, do the other.
Yeah, it starts in in a hangar, and you're walking past a bunch of mechs.
Well, actually, it doesn't, because the start of the demo is the thing that actually impressed me the most. Because the start of the demo is on the bridge of the ship, where you see like a pop-up, which is like, there's new intel available in the captain's quarters, which kind of implies that ship itself is like a hub level that you trigger missions from.
Maybe I missed this bit.
This is the beginning of the video.
Right.
And then you pull up a galaxy map like in Mass Effect, which shows you the solar system with like potential combat encounters around the solar system. And then you pick which mission you're going to do. This alone is like, this is more game than COD normally veers into. And then the mission they picked is this, like walking through a hangar, this spectacular kind of heavily scripted, but like COD grade Battlestar thing. I mean, there seemed like sorry, go on.
You get in a fighter and say some macho things to some other macho people and then launch out into space. And they do think that I've seen like quite a few space things like this where you launch out and like does like super exciting acceleration thing and then it just cuts to black and then it cuts to you being out there, which I guess is just technically necessary, but
that's a cut in the game. That's not, I don't think that's like, there's a lot of like time skips in that footage.
Right.
It's not contiguous, like.
But it seems like a missed opportunity because like just the exciting moment it kind of you don't see.
I suspect it's a bad trailer decision rather than what happens in the game.
But you then a bunch of dogfighting, which didn't look that interesting to me, kind of spectacular, but just fairly standard. And then flying up to like a giant capital ship, and then just pops open the cockpit and jumps out, jumps onto the hull of the capital ship, and so does all his friends. And now they're just like running along and grab boots using like grappling hooks to latch onto bits of debris and like running across the surface of a giant curved bit of metal and then jumping off again and grappling onto something else and grappling onto enemies and ripping their face masks off and shooting with assault rifles and stuff. And then eventually grappling their way all the way to, like the armored windscreen of the, capital ship, planting breaching charges on it, blowing it open and, all the bridge crew being sucked out into space. Then they go inside, turn on the gravity and then like play a infiltration level inside it, knocking people over with cool transparent shields. And it's like, this is a game where you can go inside the spaceships. I'm making one of those. Yeah. And it's got a grappling hook. This is so my thing.
Yeah, and then leaving by like depressurizing the cargo thing and then diving out of the ship into your waiting space fighter while really your capital ship comes in to blow it up. And it's like, this is Call of Duty. Like I watched it like, tweeting excitedly about there's another spaceship game. And it looks like, scripted as hell, but it also looks really cool. And then almost being a bit like, shamed by the fact that, oh god, this is COD. Like.
I think, I'd love to see like everyone's faces at the moment they were Call of Duty, because I heard some people like the Reddit thread on it. I was interested to see what the general impression was, because I looked at it and thought, this looks fucking great. And the Reddit thread is also full of people saying, A, this looks fucking great, and a bunch of people saying, why is everyone so down on this? This seems fucking great. And then a bunch of people saying, I'm sorry I was so down on this. This looks fucking great.
Like, yeah, it's nuts. Like, I just didn't expect it to be so exciting.
Well, the franchise has been transitioning over to sci-fi for a while now, hasn't it? Like, certainly in the last
but it's never stopped being COD. Like, it's never been...
Yeah.
Yeah.
like, it'll be kind of interesting to play it this time around and get a feel for maybe what they think the core bits of COD are, if that makes sense.
Assault rifles, I guess.
Red dot sights.
But you know what I
Reaching
mean?
through a window.
That was the only part of it that wasn't exciting, was the fact that he's using assault rifle the whole way through, and it's just kind of like daka and just a bit dull. And if you do all that with a shotgun, I'd be really into it. But also, like, the shield thing he uses, they've combined, like, a shield with a vision mode. So, like, when your shield is transparent, as I think it was in, like, the last Call of Duty with the bionic arms, but when you looking through the shield, enemies are highlighted in red, so it's, like, both shield and vision mode, which is a nutty idea, but it actually works really well.
Yeah.
And he rams some people with it, which is good.
Done the robot, and the robot fell to little pieces. That's good. It's interesting that, like, I mean, there's some people being very cynical about whether or not the dogfighting section was on rails with you controlling the guns or not.
Yeah.
For me, it didn't look on rails, but
I'm sure if you fly to the left for a bit, it will say, leaving mission zone.
Yeah, I fully imagine that's the case. Like, the reason I didn't think it was fully on rails was just the fact that, like, there were loads of, like, button prompts that pop up for, like, target this enemy and stuff.
Yeah, and also, like, when you're in space and, when you jump out of your ship and you're, like, latching onto stuff, one, like, really tiny thing that impressed me already, at that point was, as he's, like, looking at the big bit of curved debris that he eventually does grapple onto, all the time that he's looking at it, the icon is, like, matching to the right part of the geometry that he would be able to grapple onto. So, like, although he does grapple onto it, at some particular point, you can tell that it is, like, a real thing, you know, you could run
grapple
on it
to any part of it, yeah. And similarly, like, I watched that trailer twice because I didn't, like, because the reason I'm saying, like, I think you will see the full, you know, undocking from the ship, fire being fired out of the space shoot thing, is because there are a series of, like, fade to black cuts between sections, and I think they're actually quite important in contextualizing what's properly interactive and what isn't, because you have, like, the galaxy map selection bit, and then it cuts straight to the hangar deck at the start of the mission, and I imagine that's a time jump. I think you will travel to the mission and then do it, or do the briefing or whatever happens between those things. Similarly, there's the leaving the spaceship, which is obviously a scripted sequence. Then it fades to black, straight into the dogfight. And then it fades to black into the bit where the ship banks down and he jumps out of the cockpit. So, rather than it being just like but if you watch those things contiguously, it looks totally like a rail shooter. Because it looks like one contiguous ride. And I think maybe it's actually, this is a weird problem of cinematic editing, but because he's in a cockpit and the cockpit UI gives it this kind of consistent visual frame through all of them, it's not actually that obvious that there are these big time jumps and even jumps from gameplay to cutscene to gameplay to cutscene.
Yeah.
So I suspect it is like a freeform dogfighting bit in a limited area. And then when you're done with that, it transitions you into the cutscene where you fly in and jump out and then do the shooty bit. But yeah, no, I genuinely was like, I'm not going to pre-order this, but it's like, I will buy this the first day it comes out.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. All it took was space.
Yep.
Whoever would have thought it?
To be fair, it does come packaged with Modern Warfare in case you needed a ham-fisted return to the Middle East.
I thought of a counterpoint to your it's better where it's wetter for space. It's flyer up where it's higher.
Nice.
It's colder where man goes bolder.
I was trying to think of something rhymed with airless, but I couldn't. It's more careless up where it's
hairless where it's hairless.
Oh my god.
Jesus, they went to a weird place. So finally for E3, thank God.
Yes.
Finally for E3 was the moment where Hideo Kojima crashed through the roof of the Sony convention in an Iron Man suit like Tony Stark at the beginning of Iron Man 2. He just arrived in a very daft and overblown way, to introduce his new game with the actor Norman Reedus from The Walking Dead, which is called Death Stranding, and is about, so
I think it's about nature and man.
I think it's about oil, crabs, beaches, whales, babies, Norman Reedus, not wearing clothes, flying psychics, smoke monsters. That's it.
See, I really wish that I'd, made it a lot further through the Sony conference than I did, because, I started watching it this morning. I was like, oh, cool orchestra. then they got to the Orlando tribute. I burst into tears and had to like go have a coffee and like just sort of paused it and stuff. And then like, you know, sort of like dealt with my face. And then I didn't really get any further, and it turns out that I've missed quite the conference, it feels like. I mean, obviously like human emotions and stuff are important.
Well, video games.
Like, but yeah, like I just sort of, it was interesting having not seen it, watching people try to explain it. And so many people just sort of giving up or listing what felt like random nouns.
So it begins
Crab
with...
Jesus Beach was one that I believe.
So there's a lot of dead crabs on like a grey silt beach. And then you see footprints, like the handprints in the sand, like from a Invisible Man. Like
So when there was only one set of handprints, Jesus was doing handstands.
Yeah, exactly. No, when there was only one set of handprints, Norman Reedus was invisible.
Okay, good, fine.
But they're like full of like oil.
Okay.
Like it's been a terrible oil slick. A lot of endangered cormorants. And then like Norman Reedus, now visible and entirely naked, like flops onto his back. And then there's like an oil umbilical cord linking to him to a naked baby that's on his chest, and it's maybe his baby. And he looks at it like, this is my baby, in the most intense actorly way.
Super sad.
Looks so sad. And then he like looks down again, the baby's gone. But now there are like inky handprints, baby handprints, walking away down his legs and across the sand.
His hands are covered in oil as well.
And his hands are covered in oil. And he's surrounded by dead sea life, crabs, whales, and so on. And then he like turns around, and in the sky there are these like 5 enigmatic figures floating like how psychics float in Metal Gear.
Yep.
With the kind of like the intimidating dangle of a psychic.
Right. Are the psychics those like weirdly
we don't
sort
know.
of strapped?
Yeah.
Like fire people.
It's quite Akira-y.
Okay.
Like, you've seen Akira?
No.
Okay. It's like...
And I didn't get very far with Metal Gear Solid 5 either. It was too...
In this, the floating figures
violent.
are just like tiny little black specks virtually. Like you can just
they're in
tell
the far
they're
distance.
humans.
Okay.
And then there's some kind of like apocalyptic thing, and then it reveals the title, which is Death Stranding.
Right.
Apparently, cetacean stranding is when whales beach themselves, and it's this
Yeah.
weird phenomenon that isn't totally understood.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Essentially, long story short, I don't know how this is going to become a open world freeform stealth action game. Like I just
Yeah.
because I think I
It's
just
more
don't know.
sort of digital performance art at this point.
Yeah. And he's like, it sort of doesn't mean anything. Like, if it was someone else, you might think, oh, well, this seems super narrative based and probably not going to be a violent game, but then he is not at all above mixing that with just some completely incongruous piece of action.
Yeah. Probably like soundtracked with something sort of new wave, maybe. Yeah.
Basically,
Okay.
fuck knows.
I would like to see this, I think. Just to... Maybe it'll become one of those competitions, you know, like how people have that thing of like summarize La Recherche de Tom Perdu like in a minute. This will just be like, yeah, tell me what was going on in that nonsense in 30 seconds.
I can't.
You win.
And that was E3. Pretty
It
much.
was.
So far, anyway.
Yeah, there's Square Enix going on at the moment, isn't there? Or
Right.
there was at the start of this podcast.
Square Enix are doing aren't they doing like an ongoing sort of live stream of stuff?
Yeah, it's not really a show, I think. This
Yeah.
year.
It's more a kind of like, I guess, like almost like an old-fashioned TV programming schedule.
Their biggest thing for me would be Deus Ex, but I don't actually want to see any of Deus Ex. I've got to that point where I'm just...
They were
I've
starting
seen
with
enough.
Deus Ex, so it's just as well we're doing the podcast, I think. Yeah.
Should we do questions?
Yeah,
All right.
Yes!
quite so. Anim writes, Dear Toms and Trombones. While the Crate and Crowbar is one of my favourite podcasts, It by itself is not enough to fill a whole week of commutes. What other podcasts do you listen to? Is Pip, as a former regular,
Oh, well. That got existential.
Pip, as a former regular of the Not a Game podcast, sad about its on-again, off-again hiatus? And does she know anything about the reasons behind it? And will she ever be a guest there again? Or is she now a Crate and Crowbar exclusive? Best regards, Anim.
Oh. Well, I can only answer the latter part of that in as much as I think not being in the same place as the other presenters, hosts, participants, it makes things difficult in terms of finding time when everybody's free and sort of having that easy back and forth that we have because we're in the room and we can read the sort of non-verbal cues of when somebody wants to speak. So I guess it's just a bigger ask to put on a regular podcast that isn't in the same room as each other. I would absolutely guess on it. I think I have actually since I stopped doing it full time. But yeah, and I would happily guest on the Cool Ghosts, Daft Souls podcast, which I was doing sort of semi-regularly when I was still in London. But again, it's just that whole thing of being in the same room is preferable. Yeah. And so it's more about where I'm physically based and what works with schedules and stuff.
It's certainly the case that the fact that we have always done this as an in-person podcast, not as a Skype thing, means that we've had to like say it's always Tuesday night, and we've kind of got it used to it.
Yeah. I think being like really sort of set on that schedule is useful, whereas when it was me and Tom Hatfield and Craig Lager and Cara, it was very much more that all of us were doing sort of either doing freelance or had other sort of real life commitments. And so we didn't even have a stable day of recording. And I think with that comes a sort of an easier sort of thing slipping. But given that I haven't been on it in such a long time, you'd need to talk to Tom or Jordan about sort of what was going on with the actual Not a Game podcast. But there's like, I really like those guys and I enjoyed the stuff that we did together. So there's no animosity, and I would definitely be up for saying hey, but yeah.
Pip is exclusive to the Crate and Crowbar and Windows 10.
But they asked about other podcasts.
Other podcasts, yeah.
So, and Tom and I were exchanging recommendations just the other day, I believe.
Yeah, I really like Idle Thumbs, obviously, and Video Games Hot Dog, which is by the asymmetric people who do Kingdom of Loathing and the forthcoming West of Loathing, and the Frog Fractions chap, Jim Crawford. And I really enjoy them, particularly like paired with Idle Thumbs, because they are sometimes, Zach in particular is, often like deeply unimpressed by the latest indie darling. And often so am I. And it's very cathartic to hear someone like rip it apart. Like he's not super like negative or anything, but it's just nice to hear like certain things deflated a little bit. But yeah, that's just a cool podcast. They're sort of multi-platform, as are Idle Thumbs, I guess. Both tend to talk a lot about PC games, but Video Games Hot Dog people talk a lot about mobile games too, and board games and room escapes, which they're into a lot.
I think because I tend not to listen to video games podcasts, so mine are sort of far more of a grab bag almost. But Switched On Pop is really good. It takes like a sort of really interesting look at pop music, at particular singles or particular artists. And there's Bowerville, which is, it's a true crime stuff. So I don't know how people will feel about that in particular, but I think if you liked serial, particularly the first season. I think it might sort of scratch a similar itch, if that doesn't sound too much like it's divorcing from an actual crime and a terrible thing that happened. There's also You Must Remember This, which is about sort of golden age of Hollywood type stuff a lot of the time. It's kind of focusing on the Hollywood blacklist at the moment, which has been really interesting. And there was a particular run of episodes that looked in depth at the relationship of at what happened with Charles Manson, and also some of his relationships with Hollywood figures and people like that. And the mystery show, which I know Tom really likes as well. That's so good. It's sort of Starly, I've forgotten her last name.
Kine or Klein?
Yeah, I think so.
Kine.
And she tries to get to the bottom of a question that somebody has that is ungoogleable. Like somebody had a question about a particular picture on the front of a lunchbox and whether it came from a TV show that it was about, but it wasn't one of the episodes, and they were so confused. And one of them was just how tall is Jake Gyllenhaal. There's really conflicting information, and there's a whole community of people arguing about it on the internet.
Of course there is.
Yeah, my favourite was the Britney Spears one, where she tries to get to the bottom of. So Britney Spears was photographed leaving a restaurant with this book that was just so sort of, it had sold really badly and was really not available very many places at all. But the author, like, suddenly sort of became aware that Britney had been photographed reading the book and just sort of wanted to know how and why that happened. And Starly actually sort of tracks all of that down, which is really fascinating. So yeah, like those are a few off the top of my head, but there's loads of really awesome stuff out there, which is really cool. The New York Times, I think, has a really good music podcast as well, which I've been listening to, and that's been really cool.
Radical. John writes, or How I Learned to Love Subnautica. Yeah. Thanks, Pip. Thanks, Pip.
No worries.
Thanks, Pip.
An actual pleasure.
Thanks, Pip.
It's fine, don't
for pushing me over the edge. To buy Subnautica.
Yes!
I've had a lot of fun with it so far. Having played a good 10 hours or so, I find myself looking things up on the dedicated Subnautica wiki. How did I pronounce that wrong? Jin. To see where I have to go to get the good stuff and so on. Sorry.
Why are you making this sound so weird?
Because I can.
There's nothing untoward beneath the waves.
It's just occurred to me.
Not as catchy as It's Better Where It's Wetter, is it?
Everything's above board under the sea.
Shut up.
No funny business. Just fish. It's just occurred to me that this is sort of how I treat games these days. I'll play them for a bit, get a little lost, and then consult the internet to find out the best way to progress. Is this bad? I realise walkthroughs have been around since games, but am I being weak? Am I caving into my need for immediate gratification by finding exactly where I go to unlock the frankly badass submarine? Or am I merely recognising the importance of my free time and potentially navigating around what would otherwise be quite a grindy experience? Fast for reading, everybody. Sincerely, John.
Well,
Indeed.
my answer to that is that I don't see any issue with using a wiki, especially for something like Subnautica, where I actually think that there's a great deal of pleasure to be had in seeing other people who are just as excited about it as you are and who've gone to the trouble of marking where stuff is and working out how it's been implemented or what it might lead to. But the other thing is it's actually sort of helped me not waste time. And I don't mean in terms of just sort of exploring areas or sort of, pottering about. It's because it's in early access. There's a few things in there that are clearly the start of a crafting tree, but the rest of it hasn't been implemented yet, or it's been taken out while they figure out what to do with it. And so, there have been times when I've wondered whether I've actually missed a particular blueprint, or I'm supposed to be working towards something that I'm not sure of, and I've made like tons and tons of a particular resource and then just, looked it up on the wiki when I've just got annoyed with it, and it's been like, oh, that was taken out like a few patches ago and they'll probably put it back in at some point, but there's like no solution to this right now. And it's like, oh, okay, well, that's a locker of stuff for the future, I guess. But also, I think that it's fine as long as I keep an eye on when I'm losing my own enjoyment of something. So with The Witness, I came back to it at a later date and I'd forgotten something, or I'd missed where some of the tutorial puzzles were and I'd lost my bearings and stuff, and so in the end I just looked up a particular step so I knew how to solve a particular bit of a particular set of puzzles, and I felt like that had impacted my enjoyment of the game, because there's something so lovely about the way The Witness actually spoon feeds you information, or not spoon feeds it to you, but it sort of leads you through in a way that doesn't apply any pressure from the developer side. And it's such a big part of the game is the rewarding feeling that you've actually worked it out and you've made that progress for yourself, even though it's heavily curated. And so I think that marred my own experience, or my own sort of satisfaction with myself, and so that's why I don't like doing it for things where you might just end up in this loop of, oh, well, I guess I didn't activate the part of my brain that starts learning things or paying attention to things, and so I've now got the solution to this problem, but I'm not equipped with the tools to then... I think you can get into walkthrough holes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You can, get dependent on them.
I find that I very specifically don't have patience for like arbitrary finding challenges in games. Like, if it's not like important, like collectibles and stuff, then I don't really have any qualms about walkthroughing them. And I'm getting less and less bothered about doing that now, because there's a really annoying challenge in the latest Hitman episode where it's not just kill the general while dressed up as the school teacher. It's kill the general while dressed up as the school teacher after having seen all of the children's paintings.
Yeah.
And the game does no indication whatsoever when you have seen a painting. You just have to have looked at them. And so it's incredibly arbitrary, and that achievement would have been fine if it was just it's actually quite hard to kill the general dressed as a school teacher, because you can't sneak, that disguise doesn't work in the school.
It's not a good disguise.
It's not a good disguise. So, like, and they've added this arbitrary finding element. So for that, I just, I wanted to check it off the list. So I
did the same for the intern disguise. There's achievement of strangling the banker whilst disguised as the intern. I don't know what an intern looks like as distinct from the other 70 people in suits in that building, and I just kept getting people to try and take their clothes, hoping they would count as an intern, and none of them did. Like, it's really weird. Like, until that point, almost everyone I've ever taken out, you can take their clothes if they're of the same gender. And for some reason, people in suits in that building, you can't. And there's just one particular guy, he counts as the intern. You can take his clothes.
Huh.
Yeah, it's a weird one. But yeah, like stuff like that is a perfect example of like, this trial and erroring, this isn't a game, it's boring.
I think it's more just, I will use them to best sort of curate my own experience of the game, but I do try and keep an eye on the parts which tip it over into I am just now following instructions.
Yeah, that's true. TK writes, hello, stepping stool and bludgeoning device.
Hi. Sorry.
She's stepping stool, I'm bludgeoning device. Your recent talks on Hitman and the ridiculousness of how NPCs react to every costume Agent 47 wears reminded me of how I ruined the game for a friend and co-worker of mine. We work in a restaurant. My friend is not only a waiter, but is also very tall and completely bald. I got the game around release, but he had to wait a week to purchase it himself. For that week, I greeted him at work with NPC reactions to 47's way to disguise, with all of the necessary gusto and excitement. At first, he thought it was funny, but the day after he bought the game, he came into work and told me he couldn't play it, because how ridiculous the NPCs are when they notice 47 in a disguise, and that it was all my fault for pointing it out to him. On to my question. Have you ever done something purposefully or not to ruin a game for another person? Has a practical joke concerning games ever gone too far? Thanks for reading, everybody. TK from Colorado.
Aww. Speaking of The Witness, this might be a good time to...
This was good, yeah.
So, when The Witness first came out, I was playing it while I was on voice comms with some people, because it just felt like the sort of game that I would, mostly play on my own, but I was fine playing it while on voice comms with someone else or with a group of people. And it was just quite nice. It was one of those kind of companionable silences with people sort of chatting every now and again. And then my friend Dan started basically talking about, what if there's a ghost? What if there's a ghost on the island? And I can't remember exactly what he said, but it was enough to freak me out.
It's like, what if there's someone behind you while you're looking at those terminals?
I was like, it's weird how you have to just sort of zero in on the terminal, because when you're solving the puzzle, it properly fills your vision and stuff. And then he was like, what if someone was behind you? What if there's an awful ghost and it really messed me up. And so I spent most of the rest of the game, just every now and again I'd have this prickly feeling as if maybe someone was sneaking up on me, and I would do that thing when you're a kid and you try really hard to just last as long as you can without turning the light on or any of that kind of stuff, or to get into bed, but you sort of always jump the last foot, but this, as a grown up, was freaking myself out that there was a ghost behind me on a digital island where people had categorically told me that there wasn't a ghost. Just the possibility ruined that game. I love that game, but oh my god, I'm still scared of the ghost.
I don't think I have a similar incident in my own life, to be honest. Although I am now incredibly conscious of ruining games for you, so...
Yeah, well, I've already ruined PlayStation VR for myself just with the fact that PT is still installed on my PS4. I won't even plug that thing in now.
Our next question comes from Marsh.
What?
Remember him?
I thought he was gone to the east.
To remain a Galadriel.
Yeah.
No, he's in Sweden.
No, that was the west, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, fair. Okay, fine.
And he says... Hello from Sweden. Or as they say in Sweden, hello from Sweden. Because everyone in Sweden speaks perfect English. I want to read this in a really upbeat, cheery voice, because it's Marsh. Heroes of the Storm is undergoing an existential crisis at the moment. Esports team MVP Black said recently that they will probably quit the game, citing the lack of non-Blizzard sponsored tourneys, the slow rate of hero release, and a perceived policy of nerfing skills across the board to create a bland sort of balance. Subsequently, there's been much talk in the community about how the game is dying, prompting Artosis to take to Twitter last week to warn people not to create self-fulfilling prophecies, only for Cloud9 to almost immediately announce that it too will be dissolving its team. What can Blizzard do to turn things around? Coming from my perspective as a scrub, I wonder if Blizzard is simply discovering that it cannot capture both the breadth of a casual audience and a pro scene in this particularly complex and mercurial genre. I returned to HOTS to discover the meta had completely changed, and being a dummy-sucking casual, I couldn't summon the will to catch up. I felt similarly while returning to TF2 after several years, which begs the question, how will Overwatch avoid this? Smorgasbordingly yours, Marsh.
Mark. Hi, Mark.
Mark from Norway.
Where he works for Morgang.
The HOTS HOTS problem is kind of an interesting one, because I think, Pip, you and I both encountered this the same way. Like, our first feelings about HOTS as an esport were, I'm going to sneeze.
That wasn't my first
feeling as
thought.
well.
And that is the most exciting thing that's ever happened in a Heroes of the Storm tournament.
Sick burn.
No, I really like HOTS. Like, as a game, I really like it. I enjoy it a lot. I play it, and it, you know, it's nice. Those are my expert views. I'm still going to sneeze. I'm going to keep talking anyway. Jesus. Oh no, this is a sort of like sympathy response, because I'm talking about a MOBA and someone somewhere is getting angrier about it, and it's making me sneeze. Anyway, but I have some concerns about it as a spectator sport, in that it's quite boring to watch, I think. And I think a big reason for that is that so Heroes of the Storm's diversity does not come from dense, bottomlessly deep mechanics. It comes from the fact there's lots of different maps, and there are these characters that are diverse and so on. Some of them are really cool, and some of them work really inventively. But then there aren't huge power spikes or enormously diverse builds or, diverse roles. Things fit the gap in the roster they fit. And that's that very, very Blizzard kind of edges sanded off thing. And the different approaches come from the fact that there's lots of different maps. And you need to play each of them differently. But broadly speaking, and I imagine, I think maybe even some very good HOTS players would agree with me on this. There is a playbook for a given map. There is a way to do it. And it's broadly agreed on. And I don't think that makes for a very healthy game necessarily at the top competitive level, because for me it felt like watching two teams attempt to execute the same plan better than each other.
Yeah, I think I don't remember from what I have seen, and I will clarify this with I haven't kept up with the scene, so it might well have changed, and I don't want to, not flag up that if there is interesting stuff going on, it would be nice to know, but what I remember is that it didn't feel inventive, and it didn't feel particularly sort of, it when I did watch it, it didn't take me by surprise or anything. And also I think that it suffers with problems in terms of that it's not much fun, like you say, to actually spectate, and that's partly to do with how the spectator cam actually worked on the tournaments that I did watch, but it was also to do with the pacing of the games and stuff, because it's a shorter game and because everybody on one team levels up at the same rate as each other. Like, there's not actually as much to try and keep an eye on or to get to grips with or to sort of dig into as a viewer. So you sort of watch people sloshing around the map towards objectives, and that's where they'll group up, or that's where, and it's interesting to a point, but it didn't and hasn't captivated me in the way that other games with that sort of broader diversity and stuff have. Although I do feel like I write fairly regularly about hero releases and stuff. Like, that stuff doesn't feel off tempo particularly for me. Like, if you want to talk about stuff like that,
yeah, like hero release is the one area where this is simply not a concern. Like, Dota has had Dota had 13 heroes in 2012, then 6 heroes in 2013. And then it's been 1 a year. Like, it's if that, like, it's slow. I think the other thing is that, I think, the health of the game concern is not, I think it will continue to be played because it's a free to play game. It's high production values. It's Blizzard, and it's on the same launcher as a bunch of other popular games. It'll be fine.
And also it's that thing of it features characters that people love from other franchises. I do think that there is an element of, fondness that will carry over into that game if people just sort of fancy playing it for a little bit.
And I wouldn't equate the struggles of an esports scene with the failure as a game as a whole. But I wouldn't be surprised if it struggled to build an esports scene necessarily. The biggest concern, in addition to the teams leaving, is the lack of buy-in from third parties. Like, ESL don't appear to be interested in it. It's not in the line for E-League or any of those other things. Blizzard run it, and run it fairly well by all accounts. And those events are I do regularly get comments on PC Gamer Pro to the effect of where's the love for North American HOTS or all these things? I don't know if that's a consequence of the community being concerned the game is dying, going out to the media to ask us to cover the game more. But it certainly has fans and so on. It's just a question of, I just can't see it getting anywhere near the scale of Dota or League. And it doesn't necessarily need to. It can still be a good game without that.
Yeah, I think that's the answer I have to the other part of the question, which is about Overwatch and sort of similar concerns. And that's like, for me, it's, fine if they manage to make it work as an esport, okay. But like, my interest in that game is that it's fun to play. And I think that that's what everybody else that I have played with has enjoyed about it. Like, I don't think anyone has said, oh man, I wish this was an esport. I wish there was a pro tournament happening right now that I could watch rather than play. Like, people have just genuinely been enjoying playing it, or at least the ones that have stuck around and that I play with when I do have just been sort of excited about it. And so I think that HOTS could well just sort of have a similar thing where like, but I think it could be interesting, the effect that something not working or potentially not working as an esport has on a community, like whether it has a detrimental effect on what would otherwise have just been a game that carried on being played, or whether it's, just something that happens separately and the people who like playing still play. Because I don't play like a pro, and I just like dipping in every now and again and seeing what characters they've added and actually sort of just having a kick about, or like playing one of the maps and just sort of seeing how it currently works, I guess.
Marsh brings up Overwatch as well as a comparison, and I actually think he's right that I don't think Blizzard can have the two things Blizzard wants, which is Blizzard wants serious mechanical depth and complete mainstream accessibility. And I don't think they can have both in that particular genre in the MOBA. I don't think they can. I think it's defined by rules that they won't break, or it's defined by breaking rules that they won't break. However, I do think Overwatch is an example of them pulling it off, probably the best example of them pulling it off since Hearthstone, where they have taken what is good and deep about that genre, the shooter or the team shooter, and made a game loads of depth that's also really accessible. And so for that reason, I think they have a little bit less to worry about, because I would watch professional Overwatch. And I mean, Overwatch already has more third-party tournaments than Heroes of the Storm does. And that's more certainly because of the huge hype and the buy-in. But I think the game also supports it better. And as they get better spectator tools and so on, it's an inherently more exciting game, I think.
But
and
the
if they
thing
get
is,
it right,
HOTS was also like one of those games where I felt like it was very much the esports thrust of it was coming from the publishers as a sort of a way of supporting the game and as a promotional tool and stuff. And a lot of people do that nowadays because I guess like putting a prize pool on the line is maybe cheaper than putting billboard ads up all around a country. But like, I don't know, it never felt organic to me. So I enjoy the game, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if it tapers off once the organisation that is funding it,
loses interest,
bows out or decides that their priorities lay elsewhere.
Kane writes, and we should finally put the link to the save file for the Crate and Crowbar Dwarf Fortress thing from previous episode in the show notes. Kane writes, "Good evening, creative quill wielders. I have trouble with Infinity. Whenever a game asks me to build or design something, I'm compelled to optimize it as much as possible. Even a single wasted tile on a 200 by 200 grid frustrates me. It even happens in games like Minecraft that give me an infinite canvas. In Minecraft, each block of wasted space literally costs 1 over infinity to the power of 3. And I still try to make as many constructions as my constructions as compact as I can. The worst is cities skylines, where you're actually heavily incentivized to have empty space, because high density leads to traffic and noise problems. I even use the mods that unlocks all 25 tiles to build on, which is more space than I could ever need, and I still can't bring myself to sprawl my city out. Is there a humane cure for this compulsion? Does it suggest something deeply broken about me that I can't trust promises of abundance even when they're the indisputably true consequence of a game's design. What are your most shameful gaming compulsions? Regards, Kane.
That's a weird one. Like, sort of needing to be compact when you have space. I understand it. I understand it being satisfying to make things that are as efficient as possible. But the way he describes it sounds like it's almost more of a negative thing, like just can't stand to...
I really hate, like, shonky builds and, like, inefficiency and unfinished shapes in, like, building games. I really
Is
can't
that why
stand
you
it.
freak out whenever you see me on Cities Skylines?
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. This city's a big line. Monstrous.
Actually, my city in Skitty Skylines was a big line. Just like one huge long road and then just put everything along that.
Nice.
I want beautiful discrete blocks.
I like things that just look like a Rorschach ink blot test with a road running through it. No, I think I get a certain amount of that because when I play things like I'm playing the version of Warcraft 3 that Blizzard sell via their Battle.net store. And it's amazing going back, but I do find that I have that same old compulsion that I did before where I will build the farms like right next to each other on like, you know, that grid formation, even though you don't need to, even though it's not a matter of space and it looks ugly as all hell if you do it this way. Like I will still like have them right on top of each other and but I think I have that thing where as soon as that goes to hell, it's like, oh, well, sod it. The whole thing's ruined, so everything could just go everywhere, you know. Dogs can lay down with cats, who knows? So,
yeah, I guess actually designing Supreme Commander bases, I get pretty obsessive about making them neat. And I'll like do stuff like when I put down the factory, make sure I've left a border around it, because later on I'm going to put Tech 1 power generators around it. Not because I really need Tech 1 power generators at that point, because the amount of power they give you is completely insignificant. But just because technically they're giving the factory an adjacency bonus. And knowing that will please me.
Yeah.
I'm finally actually kicking my really bad completionist habit. And I think it's actually related to the question earlier about, you know, using walkthroughs because I simply don't have the time. Maybe I respect my time more. But that same urge to make everything neat and discreet also plays into an urge to finish everything. And I'm one of those people who gets quite upset if I feel like I can't, or like I've, you know, broken the completeness of something. And this has been relevant to me recently because I failed the most recent Hitman elusive target due to a bug, which really pissed me off at the time and soured me on the game for a little bit and soured me on the elusive target concept, because I feel like if you're going to put people into that kind of constraint, it should be absolutely fair. In my case, a guard just kind of got stuck walking in a doorway in a way that trapped me, and and even though he wasn't a suspicious guard, he became so with me stuck, and it's like, fuck it, I'm dead. You know, like, there's nothing I can do. And now whenever I load up Hitman, I see like I can pick to play Marrakesh or whatever, and then there's a big thing. Hopefully there's a new elusive target out tonight. Hopefully it's all gone away now. But there's a big thing that says like elusive target failed. And that feels like, and then if I go to the elusive target menu, it goes, you know, success, fail. And the idea that it'll always be like that in a game that I otherwise quite like. And even when it's got more episodes and there've been a million more elusive targets, there'll always be the one that I didn't do. That really winds me up. And in order to basically keep playing that game, I've had to slightly get over that desire to see everything finished. Which, I think it's partly, you know, obviously, it's the thing, there's loads of cool things about that system we've spoken about before, but yeah, it's definitely encouraged me to shake some of that. Like, I'm actually done with this kind of feeling.
Actually, I guess my, like, most destructive compulsion was, I need my character to look right in an RPG, and I often don't know whether they do until, like, an hour in. And Dragon Age Inquisition, I restarted, I think, 4 or 5 times, sometimes playing, like, more than half an hour into the game before I realized, no, my lipstick is not working, or, actually, I hate this voice, or, you know, there's just something wrong with my haircut. and I just
Yeah.
start the whole game again, and I just couldn't let it go.
Yeah, I've had that. I've had that with like the first couple of hours of an RPG. If I'm just not gelling with it, then I'll start again. Do that a couple of times till I feel it.
You've watched me try and work out how I look to make an RPG character, and it always goes wrong.
You're terrible at making yourself in games.
Like, I can't do it. I have to outsource.
Yeah, I'm quite good at making you in games.
But then, like, because I tried to make myself in Bloodborne, I think, and it got steadily more and more weird and unlike me, and then I ended up just getting so annoyed with it and it being so disastrous that I kind of converted it into a woman cosplaying Olaf from Frozen. Or, like, is Olaf the
snowman?
Snowman, yeah.
Yeah,
like,
it was
you
hideous.
could eventually, like, I just turned all of her skin blue, made her nose really pointed and kind of red to symbolise a carrot, and then just gave up, really.
I came back in like, how's it going? Oh, God.
Yeah, I had gone so wrong.
And that is all of the questions we have time for.
Oh wow,
this
that's a note to
evening.
end on.
Yeah. Pip's hideous Olaf. If you'd like to send us a question for a future episode, you can do so by emailing questions@crateandcrowbar.com. You can tweet us at crateandcrowbar. You can leave a question on the forum at crateandcrowbar.com/forum. If you'd like to discuss this episode, you can do that on our Discord channel. There'll be a link in the show notes, and there's one in the sidebar of the website as well. And if you'd like to follow us as individuals on Twitter, I'm at CThurston, that's CTHURSTEN. Tom is...
At Pentadact, PENTADACT.
And Pip is...
At Philippa War, which is PHILIPPAWARR.
Success!
Yeah!
Thanks for listening, everybody! Why are you two so quiet?
I don't
Continue
know.
talking. I can be closer.
Maybe you're just loud.